Chapter 218. Generally speaking, the Grey Coat Army was still very united. Of course, there were also some personal grudges, but they would usually be eased after mediation by the higher-up. Fighting in public was still relatively rare, not to mention the kind of vigorous battle between Do-Chi martial artists. Therefore, when Tang En crippled a few intermediate warriors in public, the news quickly spread throughout the base. Then, the matter of him causing a ruckus in the battle tactics department was also dug up. The reactions of the ordinary people towards this were two extremes. One was that they admired Tang En's superb strength. The other was that he was using his martial arts to bully others. Of course, the latter was fewer. Because the gray space had just made a great contribution, their prestige was still there. Some who knew the inside story reminded themselves that if it was not necessary, it was best not to provoke the gray space team, which only had a dozen people. Of course, no matter what they thought. After Tang En and Rosa finished talking, he walked in the base. He felt that the passers-by's eyes were faintly looking over and whispering about something in the distance. Under such circumstances, it was naturally not suitable for him to walk around. Tang En simply returned to the house. Naturally, he did not know that there were some new changes in the situation after that. Unknowingly, some news of him forcing Bo Lai to death secretly spread in the base. Of course, the content did not mention the mistakes that Bo Lai had made before. The main point was how ruthless Tang En's methods were. In the end, Bo Lai could not accept it after he woke up, and then how pitiful the orphans and widows were. The content was really sad, and the people who heard it shed tears. Because the method of spreading was rather secretive, this rumor did not have any effect for a while. Tang En did not know about this situation. Of course, even if he knew, he would not care. It was better that Bo Lai was dead. It would save him the trouble of not being able to find any concrete evidence. In the end, he would have to do it himself. The next morning, the sky was bright. Tang En brought more than 10 people from the Gray Space team out of the base. They braved the heavy fog and went straight to the army camp in the east. In the mine, if it were not for Old Bill, Tang En and the rest would not have been able to come out, and they would not have been lucky enough to capture the group of noble youths. Therefore, no matter what, Tang En had to fulfill Old Bill's last wish. Old Bill's hometown was Shea Village, located in the east of the base. There were signs on the simple map that Tang En carried in his arms. It was probably near the former mine. The distance wasn't too far, and they could reach it in half a day. "Boss, they saw us." David pointed at the soldiers in front of them. Tang En pursed his lips. "So what if they see us? We're the bosses now. Let's go straight through." Whoosh! A moment later, a sharp arrow was inserted in front of Tang En. "Who are you?" "Those who want to pass, call your manager out." Step, step, step. Amidst the scattered footsteps, several small groups of soldiers formed an arc and surrounded Tang En and the others. "Gray Coat Army? What are you doing here?" one of the captains asked with an ugly expression. Both sides were still fighting to the death a few days ago. In the end, they were even ambushed by Tang En and the others from behind. Naturally, they wouldn't be polite. David took a step forward and pursed his lips. "You don't need to know why we're here. Find someone who's in charge. We're going over." Similarly, the Gray Coat Army had lost more brothers in this battle than the other side. One of David's friends had died in this battle. Naturally, he wouldn't be polite to the other side. "How dare you?" Soldiers were all hot-blooded. The captain obviously didn't have a good temper. He glared at David and said, "You're just a lowly gray coat citizen. You want to see our commander? Go back to where you came from." "Yo, you're quite arrogant." David clicked his tongue and gestured with his finger. "Do you dare to pick one? Your master David will only use one hand." Tang En shook his head lightly, but didn't say anything. David was obviously trying to stand up for his dead friend. Of course, he wouldn't stop him. Damn it, these lowly gray coat citizens are too bold. "Captain, teach him a lesson." "Teach him a lesson," David's arrogant attitude attracted a lot of hatred. The other side's soldiers immediately became rowdy. "Haha, you said it yourself. Don't blame me for being too ruthless when the time comes." The captain laughed sinisterly and raised his spear. These soldiers naturally knew that both sides had stopped fighting. Under such a delicate situation, if there were any more casualties, it might become a new fuse. But even if the other side provoked them, as long as they didn't kill them, there wouldn't be any problems. "You're so long-winded. If you want to fight, come quickly. I still have to hurry on my way later." David raised his sword with one hand and said proudly, "How dare you? Straight forward!" The captain roared and quickly stepped forward. The spear was pointed at David's chest. David stepped to the side and swung his sword. Bang! The spear and sword clashed, making a loud sound. This attack was just a test. Then, the two of them started to fight in the field. Whoosh! The surrounding soldiers naturally cheered for them. Tang Yen glanced at them and nodded. In terms of battle energy cultivation, David's current strength was the highest among the members of the Gray Space. Under Tang Yen's training, his attacks were not like before, where he only used brute force. As for the captain, although his cultivation was not high, he was very experienced. Every attack was aimed at David's weak point. That was the left side of his chest. After all, David was fighting with one hand, so there were bound to be some problems with his body coordination. "Ha, Captain, come on, a little faster and you'll hit this kid. What's the point of just dodging? If you have the ability, don't move." It turned out that after the captain found out David's strength, he immediately launched a round of attack. His spear was pointed at David's left side. But unfortunately, he missed by a little each time. It would be a joke if the captain said that he didn't dodge. He just wanted to take the opportunity to disrupt David's mood and rhythm. "Okay, David, stop playing." Tang Yen suddenly curled his lips and said, "Haha, okay." David, who seemed to be in a sorry state, suddenly laughed. Then, his body shook and his hand swung down heavily. Whoosh! In the whistling sound, the sword did not arrive, but the wind pressure had arrived. The captain was shocked. He naturally knew what this sword whistling meant. It would only be produced when the strength reached a certain level. He did not care about attacking. He hurriedly raised his hands and blocked with his spear. "Get lost." Boom! The captain was smashed to the back with his spear like a cannonball. Bang, bang, bang! At the back were the soldiers who were cheering. They did not expect the situation to reverse so quickly. They only felt darkness in front of their eyes and were smashed to the ground by the captain. Ah! David's move was intentional. Seeing the other party fall into a ball, he immediately laughed mockingly. "Damn it, you brothers, go! Damn it, this is too much. Leave them here." The captains of the other two squads saw that they were defeated so miserably. They felt ashamed and immediately gave the order to attack. Whoosh, whoosh, but before they could lift their spears, their bodies flew out like clouds and fell to the ground. Bang, bang. "Think carefully before you speak." Tang Yen stood in front of the two captains and said indifferently, "I can say very responsibly that if there is a problem, you won't be able to shoulder it." The surrounding soldiers were shocked. They did not see anyone come over just now, and the captain was easily taken down. What did this mean? This meant that as long as the other party was willing, taking their heads would be as easy as taking something out of his pocket. What happened here? Ta. As soon as he finished speaking, there was a rush of footsteps. Gradually, a dense crowd of people appeared in the fog. When they got closer, they saw an officer in mail armor striding in front. Behind him were some soldiers scattered around. In the middle of them were some men in cloth clothes. "Boss, in the middle are our brothers from the Gray Coat Army. Today they seem to have agreed to exchange prisoners." Michaud came over and said, Tang Yen nodded to show that he understood. The two sides had been fighting for more than 10 days, especially the recent fierce offensive and defensive battles. Naturally, some of the enemy's injured soldiers were captured. In fact, the Grey Coat Army had the terrain advantage and had more prisoners. Sir, A soldier quickly came forward and explained the situation. The officer nodded and walked in front of Tang En and the others. Do you have a pass? Yes. Tang En reached out and took out the letter written by Rosa and handed it over. The officer opened it and looked at it, then nodded. Okay, you can pass. After saying that, he stretched out his hand in front of Tang En. Let's get to know each other. I'm from the Thunderbolt's army. Tang En also stretched out his right hand casually and held it with both hands. The officer's expression suddenly changed, and he could not continue what he was going to say. The officer originally wanted to show Tang En his strength so that he could get back at him. Unexpectedly, as soon as he exerted his strength, he felt a strong force coming and directly turned his strength into nothing. Good. The officer looked up at Tang En seriously and then took a deep breath. Chi. A dazzling red light suddenly burst out from his arm. His fighting aura flowed and kept attacking Tang En. Tang En's movements were much smaller. Only when he got closer could he see traces of blood-red light through the gaps between his 5 fingers. The surrounding soldiers immediately focused their gazes. From the outside, their officer undoubtedly had the advantage. The fighting aura level of both sides was not on the same level. However, the person involved did not think so. The officer only felt that his fighting aura could not pass through at all. On the contrary, his palm was constantly tingling, as if he was holding a plant full of barbs. Raising his eyebrows, Tang En said with a smile, "Let's get to know each other. My name is Arthur." The officer's body trembled and he cried out involuntarily, "Arthur!" Naturally, they had heard of this name before. Just a few days ago, the owner of this name swaggered away the captives in front of their general. Under such circumstances, there was naturally no need to be ruthless. While the officer was still in shock, Tang En was the first to let go of his hand. The officer looked deeply at Tang En, then turned around and waved his hand. Let him go. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 219. Since the Grey Coat Army could not get back at them for a while, and since the Grey Coat Army had the ultimate weapon that could decide the life and death of the young nobles, Twain and company would naturally be allowed to leave. After passing through the army's camp, the Grey Coat Army sped up and headed straight for Shave Village. Not long after, they passed through the valley. When they saw the collapsed mine, they couldn't help but sigh. At noon, at the top of the hill, Twain looked into the distance from his vantage point and finally saw a group of residential areas in the mountains. Next to it was a small river. "Boss, this should be the place. Bill said that there's a dark yellow river near the village. Because there's sand in it, it's called Shave Village." David covered his eyes with his hand and pointed into the distance. "His house is at the west end of the village, under the biggest old locust tree." Tang En pressed the coins in his pocket and nodded. "Okay, let's go." Naturally, announcing the funeral wasn't pleasant, but at this point, Tang En and the others could only give more money and hope that the mother and daughter would be settled down. But at that moment, Luke narrowed his eyes and suddenly said, "Hey, boss, something doesn't seem right, huh?" Tang En, who was walking down the hill, turned his head in surprise. "What's wrong? This village seems empty. It shouldn't be like this at this time." Luke's eyesight was outstanding, and he could see further than ordinary people. At that moment, he saw the clues of the mountain village in the distance. "Hey, maybe they're eating lunch at home," David said casually. "Well, maybe that's the case." Luke's expression was hesitant, and his tone was uncertain. While they were talking, a few black dots suddenly flew out of the mountain village in the distance and soared into the sky. "That's Vulture, it's Vulture." Luke was the first to speak. Tang En's face changed slightly and his heart sank. "Hurry up, let's go." After he finished speaking, he quickly ran down the hillside. As David stepped forward, he scratched his head and asked in confusion, "What's wrong?" On the side, Michaud's face was a little ugly. "Idiot, think about what vultures like to eat, rotten meat." Michaud probably knew that David didn't understand, so he answered his own question. No, it can't be. In such a remote village, there would not be much rice and flour. How could the poor people leave their meat to rot and attract so many vultures at once? Even if David was a fool, he would know that something was wrong. The distance between the hill and the farm was still quite far, but Tang En and the others sped up. In less than 2 hours, the mountain village was already in sight. The closer they got, the uglier their expressions became. There was still no sign of human habitation in front of them, and some of the outer wind-blocking walls had been pushed down. Tang En waved his hand. "Let's go to Bill's house first." The farm was not big, and after walking a few steps forward, Tang En and the others saw a thick old locust tree. Winter was coming, and most of the branches and leaves on the tree had fallen off, leaving only some thick tree trunks and people hanging on them. Tang En looked up and saw a young man hanging on the tree. He shook his head, pushed open the half-closed wooden door, and entered Bill's house. The house was in a mess, and the cupboards and cabinets were pushed to the ground, as if they had been ransacked. However, there were no corpses inside. After passing through the big house, there was the backyard and the woodshed behind it. Broken pottery tiles lay on the side. The door of the woodshed was broken, and only one side of it was still hanging in the air, swaying with the wind. Tang En walked up to take a look, and his eyes narrowed slightly. On the left side of the woodshed, there was a young woman in plain clothes, and her delicate face was full of pain. Her red clothes were almost completely torn apart, her white skin was full of bruises, and her lower body was in a mess. The fatal wound was on the left side of her chest, where a rusty steel knife was inserted in the place where the source of breast milk was supposed to be. Bang! Dust flew everywhere. Huff, huff, huff! David punched the wall, and then he grabbed his hair and squatted on the ground, panting like an injured beast. Needless to say, the young woman who was tortured to death was undoubtedly Bill's daughter-in-law. Tang En took off his black shirt and spread it over the young woman's body, stepped back and bowed deeply. He took a deep breath and called out, "Michaud, here." Michaud walked out and said in a deep voice, "Take a few people and find the bandits nearby. I don't care what method you use, but in 2 hours, I want to know everything that happened here." "Yes." Michaud nodded and quickly led a few people out of the courtyard. "David. Here. Take the others and search the farm. If there are no survivors, bury the villagers' bodies together." "Okay." David lowered his head and took the rest of the people out. "Bill, I'm sorry." Tang En sighed faintly. According to the degree of decomposition of the bodies, these villagers were killed about 2 days ago. If they had set off immediately after returning to the Grey Coat Army, they might have been able to catch up. But at that time, they were physically and mentally exhausted, and many of them had not recovered from their injuries. Shaking his head, Tang En stepped forward to pick up the young woman's body. Suddenly Tang En's hands paused, and he looked into the woman's eyes. The young woman's face was full of pain, but there was a hint of relief in her eyes. Following her gaze, Tang En looked to the right of the woodshed. There were a few planks of wood laid flat, which seemed to be used to keep things from being moist. Tang En stepped over, stretched out his foot and stomped. Thud! Tang En raised his eyebrows, walked down, and reached out his hand to lift it. Bang! The planks were thrown to the side, and there was a dark staircase below. A burst of damp stench rushed up. Cellar? Tang En came to a sudden realization and walked down without hesitation. Whoosh! Unexpectedly, as soon as he walked down the stairs, an arc-shaped blade was swung at his head. However, this attack was not fast, so naturally it could not hurt Tang En. He did not move from his spot and accurately pinched the blade with his fingers. The attack was a curved iron blade, commonly known as a scythe. Although the cellar was dark, Tangan could still barely see the short figure on the other side of the scythe. The short figure tried to snatch the scythe a few times, but to no avail. With a scream, she bared her white teeth and tried to bite him. Tsk. Tangan smacked his lips and grabbed her clothes. Old Bill, eh? The short figure that was struggling suddenly stopped. Phew. Tangan could not help but smile and breathe a sigh of relief. You must be Old Bill's granddaughter. You? Who are you? The voice was young and clear, and the short figure's eyes fluttered in the dark. How do you know my grandfather's name? Ha! Tangan was ecstatic. My name is Tangan, and I was entrusted by Old Bill to your mother. Mother is dead. The voice on the other side lowered a little and then asked, Why didn't my grandfather come? Let's talk about this outside. Tangan put the person down, and then his nose could not help but twitch. Strange, where did the stench come from in the cellar? Looking around, Tangan was stunned. A black figure with a steel blade was lying at his feet. His body, head, neck were covered with long and messy scars. On his feet, there was an iron tool that was firmly stuck to it. Yes, that was a beast trap. This. Tsk. Tangan looked at the scythe in his hand, and then looked down at the beast trap on the ground. He could not help but smack his lips. Tap tap tap, wah. Just as Tangan was looking around, the short figure had already run out of the cellar, and then a heart-wrenching cry was heard. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidien. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 220. Old Bill's teenage granddaughter was called Carol. In the other world, this name meant a little bird that always sang cheerful songs. However, this cheerful bird was now constantly wailing. From her intermittent narration, Tang En and the others learned that about 2 nights ago, a group of bandits suddenly came and surrounded the village. The 100,000 Mountains was a chaotic place, and there were as many bandits as there were hairs on an ox. Shea Village had been visited by these people more than once or twice, but they usually only took some food and water and left. They would not kill the goose that laid the golden eggs. But this time, when the old village chief stood up and prepared to offer food, his head was directly cut off with a knife. Then, the cruel burning, killing, and looting began. Because of the urgency of time, little Carol's mother only had time to hide her in the cellar and tell her not to speak. Then, a ferocious-looking big man broke through the door and rushed in. There were gaps in the wooden plank. Little Carol, who covered her mouth tightly, watched her mother fail to commit suicide. She was constantly raped and then killed with a knife. Things did not end there. It was normal for farms to have cellars. The bandits did not seem satisfied with the harvest this time, so they began to search the cellars of every house. Naturally, they killed a lot of people who were hiding. After a bandit searched the woodshed of little Carol's house, he found the cellar under the wooden planks. But what happened next was a bit unexpected. The bandit unluckily stepped on a trap that was originally prepared for rats and some earth-penetrating animals. While he was screaming in pain, little Carol bravely rushed out of the darkness and directly slashed the bandit with her sickle. Originally, the trap only slightly injured the bandit. Even if he was hit again, he still had the strength to fight back. After all, little Carol's strength was too weak. But the bandit might have been a villain for a long time, and now he was suffering retribution. Little Carol's knife happened to cut his neck. Then, there were all kinds of mindless slashes. By the time little Carol came back to her senses, the bandit had already been deformed. Then little Carol closed the cellar door, and stayed inside with the bandit's corpse for 2 days until Tang En and the others arrived. At this time, David's search was complete. Other than little Carol, there was no one alive in Shea Village. The bodies of all the villagers were gathered by the river at the east side of the village, where a pit had been dug. After persuading the crying little Carol with great difficulty, the young woman's body was also placed inside, and then buried with soil. Apart from little Carol's mother, none of the other villagers had erected a stone tablet. This was something that couldn't be helped, but it was better than being exposed and eaten by various scavengers. After settling everything, Tang En walked over to the dazed Carol. "Carol, do you have any relatives?" "No, I only have my mother and grandfather." Little Carol lowered her head, tears still dripping from her red eyes. Tang En nodded and said, "Then you will follow Big Brother Tang En from now on, okay?" I don't know." Little Carol's mind was blank after learning that her two relatives had died. "Then it's settled." Tang En patted the dust off Carol's head and said straightforwardly. David also walked over and squatted down. "Sister Carol, my name is David. Your grandfather, Old Bill, once saved our lives, so you can rest assured that all of us here will take care of you. If anyone bullies you in the future, your big brother David will definitely stand up for you." Little Carol opened her empty eyes and nodded unconsciously with tears in her eyes. Sigh. David touched Carol's soft hair and stood up with a silent sigh. After a while, Michaud and the others also returned to Shea Village. After learning that Old Bill still had relatives in this world, they were happy again. "Boss, I found out. This group of bandits is passing by. There are about 100 of them. They passed by here 2 days ago, and now they are heading south." "Very good." Tang En nodded. "If they knew the direction, they would be able to catch up with them." "Then boss, what should we do now?" "It's very simple." Tang En narrowed his eyes. "Track him, find him, and kill him." Although Tang En's words were simple, the actual operation was not easy. After all, the other party had been gone for 2 days, and no one knew if he had changed directions during this time. In the end, Tang En simply scattered the gray space, and 3 people formed a fan shape to search forward. When the gray space was established, there were 11 people. 1 was sacrificed, and 1 was seriously injured. Now, including Tang En, David, and Michaud, there were only 12 people, so they could only be divided into 4 groups. At this time, Tang En also felt that the gray space must be expanded. Otherwise, what was the difference between this organization and not having established it? After dividing into groups, the members of the gray space quickly jumped into the continuous mountain range. Tang En walked on the mountain road with Carol and 2 other people, supporting them in the middle. Of course, the object of their search now was not the passing bandits, but the people sent by the bandits in the mountains. If one were to ask who was most familiar with the terrain and what had happened here, it would undoubtedly be them. Wherever there were barren mountains and unruly rivers, there would be bandits. This was almost a law. There was no need to say much about the terrain here in the 100,000 mountains, so bandits, and so on could be said to be local specialties here. The efficiency of the gray space members was not bad. After all, they had followed Tang En for so long, and they had learned a lot of various methods. Although they came out to make a living, they had to be righteous. But the knife was on their necks, and they were betraying others, so the bandits who were caught were very cooperative. Some of them were afraid of being silenced, and they even spoke in detail. A few hours later, the news from all over the place was summarized to Tang En. From the looks of it, this group of bandits had not changed direction and were still heading south. Bandits still had a strong sense of territory. When their peers passed by, they sometimes needed to greet each other to show courtesy. So it didn't take long for Tang En and the others to know that this group was called the Mountain Cat Bandit. The leader's name was no longer known. As for his nickname, it was Mountain Cat. He was thin, had an ordinary face, and was sinister and cunning. The most eye-catching sign was a few tufts of mustache on the side of his mouth, which was also the origin of his nickname Mountain Cat. This group of people used to be bandits and made a living in a dangerous terrain in the southeast. But for some reason they suddenly fled here. This was probably the reason why they slaughtered Shea Village without any scruples. Anyway, it was not their territory, so they did not need to consider the problem of killing the goose that lays the golden eggs. At night, Tang En carried Carol, who was tired from crying, on his back and continued to move forward. At this time, it was even more difficult to obtain information. At night, there were few people, and most of the bandits had gone back. Now, only by finding the other party's stronghold and catching the sentries could they possibly obtain some information. The next day, in the morning, the clouds were dark and the wind was chilly. On the rugged mountain road, a group of about 100 people were curled up and moving forward against the cold wind. From the variety of weapons in their hands, one could tell that they were not kind people. Their attire was also very mixed. Some of them wore half-body armor, while others wore thick cotton clothes. The only similarity was that they all looked listless and their steps were sluggish. Walking at the front of the group was a thin man in his prime. His face was gloomy and ordinary, and only the few tufts of mustache on the side of his mouth were rather conspicuous. It was rare for him to be wearing a neat copper armor. "Boss, how much longer do we have to walk? I'm afraid it's going to rain soon. Look, our brothers can't take it anymore." A strong man with a steel knife in his hand came over and asked. The thin man looked back and cursed, "Motherf *cur, saying you're tired after walking for a while. Let's see if your goddamned women will be energetic." The big man touched his head and smiled obscenely. "These two are different. TSK. Boss, when are we going to find another village to have some fun? The addiction from 2 days ago has passed. F***ck. Other than playing with women, what else can you do?" The thin man said angrily, then his expression softened. Wait until we pass this mountain range. If we keep doing this, we'll be hunted down by our peers." The strong man heard this and immediately became listless. He sighed and said, "It's still better in the past. Guarding the road and there will be fat sheep coming to our door." "Stop talking nonsense. Isn't this an army war? They're directly blocking the road and searching the mountain." The thin man gritted his teeth and said, "Motherf *cur, this is an unlucky year. Of all the places to fight, they just have to fight here." After a pause he continued, "Now we're in someone else's territory. Forcibly occupying it is taboo. Pass down the order. After we find a place to settle down, I'll definitely bring my brothers to find another village to have some fun." "Haha, okay." The strong man was overjoyed and replied, "Boom, rumble." The 100 people only felt their eyes brighten and looked up in shock. They saw that the originally gray clouds were dyed with ink and quickly turned black. Then, droplets of rain started to fall. "Motherf *cur, it's really raining." The thin man punched his palms angrily and looked depressed. "Boss, this rain won't be light. Let's find a place to hide." The strong man wiped the rainwater off his face and said, "Easy for you to say. Where do we hide?" They were in the middle of the mountain range. It was not close to the village, and there were no inclined canyons. "Boss, there's a forest." The strong man had sharp eyes. He looked left and right and pointed at the tips of trees that popped up from the side of the mountain road. "Okay, tell the brothers to speed up." This group of bandits who were in a hurry to hide from the rain did not know that on a hill a few miles behind them, a group of about 10 people were happily pointing in their direction. "Motherf *cur, I finally found you guys. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Chidien. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation." Chapter 221. Not many people liked rainy days, especially the kind that was not suitable for poetic strolling, because it meant that one would have to stay at home or go out. Fortunately, the storm in the north left as quickly as it came. When it was close to evening, the rain finally stopped a little. There were no rainbows, only new leaves, the unique fragrance of the soil after the rain, and the muddy mountain road. "Damn it, how can there be any fat sheep in this weather? Let's go back." Above the canyon, a big man hiding in a simple stone building complained. "Don't worry." Another older man beside him shook his clothes and climbed out of the stone house. "Dedication, we need patience in this line of work." Let's wait a little longer, we'll call it a day and go back. Phew. Okay. The big man climbed out and took a deep breath of fresh air, then looked into the distance. Suddenly, his body shook. Someone is coming. Where is it? The older man's face lit up with joy. He looked in that direction and saw a black dot rapidly approaching from the winding mountain road in the distance. Aha! Finally, it's here. What a pity, it's just one person. The big man rubbed his hands and said regretfully, "Small streams flow long. Besides, it's just one person, we'll be fine too." Hee. The older man seemed to be more experienced. He pinched his chin and said with a smile, "Monopolize? Haha, that makes sense. You're really wise." Hee, kid, you still have a lot to learn. Something's not right, this person's speed. The older man was shocked. The black dot in the distance had already passed through 2 mountain roads and was about to reach the canyon. Yo, this kid runs pretty fast. Watch me block him. The big man walked quickly to the side of the mountain and was about to push down a huge rock. The canyon road was not wide. If this huge rock fell down, the road would be blocked. But the burly man was hit in the head and immediately rubbed the spot where it hurt. He looked back in confusion. "Idiot, don't push it." The older man panicked and said in a low voice, "We can't afford to offend this person." Whoosh! The sound of clothes fluttering in the wind came from afar. The 2 bandits looked at each other. Although the canyon was not very high, it was not very low either. Even so, the sound of clothes fluttering could still be heard from the bottom of the mountain. How fast did this person have to be? While they were in a daze, the fast figure had already jumped into the canyon. Only then did they realize that the slightly bloated figure from afar was actually a man in black carrying a little girl on his back. Whoosh, whoosh, before they could clearly see the appearance of the black-clothed man, after a series of afterimages, the figure actually left the canyon, and then gradually became a small black dot. The ground. The burly man seemed to have discovered something. He pointed down and was tongue-tied. The older man also noticed that there were almost no footprints on the muddy mountain road after the rain. Rubbing their eyes, the 2 of them glanced at one another. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, no one would have thought that someone had passed by here. Let's go back. The burly man opened his mouth and suggested again. Good idea, let's go now. The older man didn't hesitate and turned to leave. In the distance, the man in black and the little girl who had just passed by. Brother Tang-en, someone was watching us just now. The little girl rubbed her sleepy eyes and her face was abnormally red. Yes, I know. Carol, you can sleep for a while. The speed did not affect the man in black's clear voice. Oh, but I can't sleep. I feel a little uncomfortable. The little girl pouted and hummed softly. Hold on for a while. We'll be there soon. Well, Brother Tang-en will tell you another story. The man in black paused for a while. Taking advantage of the time to catch his breath, he stomped on the ground. Before the mud splashed up, he had already left the place. Okay, once upon a time, there was a shepherd boy who went to the mountain to herd sheep every day. But his memory was not very good. In order to be afraid that there would be too few sheep, he would go and count every once in a while. 1 sheep, 2 sheep, 3 sheep. Oh, he forgot again, so he went and counted again. 1 sheep, 2 sheep, 3 sheep. The man in black turned his head. The little girl had already fallen asleep on his back, her nose twitching weakly. Phew! The man in black breathed a sigh of relief, then frowned and shook his head slightly. These 2 people were naturally Tang-en and little Carol. Although their revenge was successful in the morning, little Carol had a very high fever, perhaps because of the heavy rain or the stimulation of her spirit. This was the wilderness, and there was no place to treat her. Tang-en decisively decided that he would take little Carol back to the station first, and David and the others would rush back later. With Tang-en's speed, there was no need to talk about it. Now that he was in his full state and his skills were constantly buffering and stacking, ordinary people who saw him would be no different from seeing a ghost in broad daylight. Tang En didn't know how many waves of bandits he had encountered just now. Some of them had bright eyes and didn't dare to make a move. Tang En didn't bother with those who made a move. He just flashed past them, leaving them waving their sabers as they rushed down the mountain. Of course, such speed required physical support. After running for half a day, Tang En was also panting like a cow and his legs were sore. However, little Carol's condition couldn't be delayed at all. He could only grit his teeth and hold on. Go, 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 speed up, speed up, speed up. When he said that they were almost there, he wasn't coaxing little Carol. At this speed, in less than half an hour, Tang En saw the collapsed mine. Seeing the mine meant that they were almost at the valley. Tang En didn't stop at all and flashed past. He directly went over a few small hills, and the flat valley was already in sight. Tang En suddenly exclaimed, and then his footsteps paused. His body swayed a few times, and he came to an emergency stop. It turned out that from afar, Tang En saw a long line of people slowly walking in from the edge of the valley. Ha! Tang En wasn't in the mood to think about who these people were. What was their purpose? He just stared straight at the other party's horse. It was like a thirsty man encountering a deep well. His current speed was, of course, faster than a horse, but he couldn't guarantee that he could last all the way to the camp. If he had a horse, it would undoubtedly be much better. Thinking of this, Tang En no longer hesitated and quickly ran down the hill toward the team. The distance between the two sides wasn't far, and the other party's speed had been slow. Tang En naturally approached them quickly. However, although this team was slow, they did a good job of guarding. As soon as Tang En appeared at the back, the other party discovered him, and a team was immediately transferred over. This was just a simple precaution. After all, the valley was so big, the other party might not be coming toward them. But after a moment these people frowned. Because Tang En's goal was very clear, and that was to rush straight toward them. As he got closer, Tang En also found that these people didn't seem to be simple. Not to mention other things, just the golden fish scale armor on their bodies was much stronger than the average soldier. Who are you? Stop quickly. Stop? You must be kidding. Tang En turned a deaf ear and still rushed toward them. Release. Whoosh. Tang En, who was running quickly, suddenly moved sideways by a foot and instantly avoided the whistling arrow. Then, he didn't stop at all and continued to rush forward. This arrow was originally just a warning, but after seeing Tang En's actions, they immediately became nervous. A small team of guards left the team and quickly came to stop him. Who are you? If you don't stop, attack. Before the warning could be finished, Tang En was already in front of them. The team leader immediately made a decision and immediately ordered the attack. Hiss, hiss, hiss. The sound of the saber cutting through the air was instantly heard. But after the slash, these guards were stunned because the person in front of them had disappeared. Damn it, behind! The small group of guards turned around and saw that the intruder, who was originally in front of them, could only see his back as he ran towards the convoy. How could it be? When did he go over? The people in the convoy were also stunned. They originally thought that even if the small team couldn't finish him off, they could at least stop him for a moment. But in a blink of an eye, the intruder actually broke through just like that. Enemy attack, be alert! A big man with a full beard in the team shouted loudly. The convoy stopped instantly, and then the guards moved closer. Attack! Whoosh! This time there were even more guards. A large group of them rushed over with shining sabers in their hands. Under the charge, the two sides instantly closed in. Whoosh! Where is he? Damn it, he came in! Damn it, don't slash randomly. Spread out, spread out! The small team of guards who had been easily shaken off finally knew how the intruder got rid of them. His figure was like a fish in water, quickly and nimbly shuttling in and out of the crowd. As long as there was a slight gap, he would immediately insert himself. If the front was blocked tightly, he would reach out and push lightly, or use his feet to trip. All kinds of small movements were done easily. The guards who were gathered together were already confused and disoriented. Under such a small trick, they immediately fell into a complete mess and their formation was instantly disrupted. In just a moment, Tang En left the group of battered and exhausted soldiers and continued to approach the convoy. "A bunch of trash, get out of my way!" The big man with a full beard pushed the soldiers in front of him away and raised his sword high to slash down. "Stop!" As the big sword fell, the body of the sword suddenly shone brightly, and then a blue fighting aura came out of the sword and slashed at Tang En in the shape of a half-moon. This big man was obviously a veteran of fighting, and he only released the fighting aura a moment before the attack, intending to catch Ling Xian off guard. Boom! Chunks of soil flew, and a hole immediately appeared in the ground. Was he dead? Of course not. The big man with a full beard only felt a shadow in front of him, and suddenly looked up, immediately widening his eyes. He saw Ling Xian's body lightly leap into the air, and then the tip of his foot lightly tapped the back of the big sword, and then jumped up again, over his head. The big man with a full beard stood like a wooden stake, and his mind was a little confused for a moment. He was passed by just like that? Tang En didn't care about the other party's feelings, and after passing the big man, he had already rushed into the convoy. His figure accelerated again, and rushed to the front of a carriage, and the blade in his hand swung down. Hiss! The reins were broken, and Tang En nimbly flipped onto the handsome horse, and then without hesitation stabbed the horses but with the dagger. Hiss! The war horse felt pain, and immediately raised its head and neighed. Then it flipped its 4 hooves and rushed forward. Ta-ta-ta! The horse's momentum was very fierce, and the oncoming soldiers were caught off guard, and subconsciously jumped to the side. "Everyone, sorry to disturb you. Let me borrow your horse, and if we meet in the future, I will definitely return it." Ta-ta-ta! The sound gradually faded away with the horse's hooves. Borrow the horse. The guards looked at each other, and their hearts were filled with shame and anger, and that was King robbery, okay. Hey, what's going on? What's going on? The door of the carriage opened, and a rather charming young man hurriedly controlled the frightened horse. "Hey, why is there one less? Who stole my horse?" The young man stood up with a face full of anger, and his rather uncoordinated long robe was messy in the wind, and his white legs full of leg hair were also exposed. "Ah, it's so cold." Philip, quickly close the door. "Annoying, if you don't close it, I will be seen naked." After a wave of condemnation, flower shoes, underwear, and so on were thrown out one after another. Bang! The door closed, and Philip jumped out of the carriage in a sorry state. Cough, cough. The big man with a full beard walked over, and ignoring the lipstick marks on the other party's face, he bowed and said, "Lord Philip, just now, someone broke into the convoy and stole your horse." "Oh, then where is he? Daring to steal my horse. You have good taste, I'll just teach you a little lesson." The other party came too hastily, sorry, he ran away. The big man with a full beard lowered his head. Philip opened his mouth, blinked a few times, and then turned to look at the messy guards over there. A moment later, a hysterical and exaggerated roar was heard. What kind of joke is this? You are the Royal Guards, the Royal Guards. You actually let a thief, oh no, a bandit steal your horse right under your nose. God, tell me this is just a joke, even though this is not funny at all. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 222. It's not a big problem, just a cold. You'll recover after a few days of rest. Phew, that's good. Thank you, doctor. Haha, you're welcome. In the white tent, Tang En bowed and sent off an old man with a white beard before letting out a long sigh of relief. His legs went soft and his body swayed a few times before he hurriedly supported himself on a chair and sat down. With the help of the horse, Tang En finally rushed back to the Grey Coat Army's encampment in the evening. There, he happened to meet Josiah and Fry. Under Josiah's lead, the few of them quickly rushed to the Grey Coat Army's treatment area and found the doctor. "Tang, what's wrong?" Josiah walked over anxiously. "You don't look well. Do you need a doctor to take a look?" Tang En waved his hand. "It's nothing, I'll be fine after some rest." He had been running wildly in the rain for half a day. How could his complexion be good? "Brother Tang En, didn't you go to Old Bill's house? Why did you bring back a child? Where's David and the rest?" Fry didn't say much as the situation was urgent. "Now?" he finally asked in bewilderment. "Tisk." Tang En shook his head and sighed. "We were too late. Old Bill's village was destroyed by a group of bandits." "What?" Fry was shocked and his expression changed. Then his daughter-in-law and granddaughter. Fry was a person who valued friendship and loyalty. Otherwise, he wouldn't have disregarded everything and chopped off the heads of nobles for the sake of his subordinates. Old Bill could be said to have saved his life. If not for his sensitive identity, he would have followed Tang En over at that time. "She's Old Bill's granddaughter." Tang En pointed at the unconscious Carol and didn't say anything else. Fry naturally understood what he omitted. He clenched his fists and his eyes spat fire. Damn it, where are those bandits?" "Don't worry." Tang En pursed his lips and narrowed his eyes. "How could I let them go? I've already killed them all." "Good job, Brother Tang En, thank you." Fry pounded his palm and said resentfully, "They're lucky. If they fall into my hands, humph. What's there to thank me for? It's what I should do." Then Tang En looked at little Carol with a strange expression. He thought to himself, it wasn't cheap. That bandit group's boss died, tsk. Fred nodded when he heard that. "That's true. We'll be comrades in the future. There's no need to be so polite." Tang En's heart skipped a beat. Then, he looked at Fry with joy. "That's right. A few of my brothers and I have decided to join the Grey Coat Army." Fred shrugged. "Actually, other than this, we don't know what else to do. Haha, good." Tang En stood up and patted Frey's shoulder. "Don't say that. At least you can realize your dream." "Dream?" Fry stared blankly. Then, he thought of what he said before. The best ending in this life was to stand side by side with his brothers and finally die on the battlefield. Of course, this was a joke. Tang En was happy that Fry chose to join the Grey Coat Army. Who was this? This was the captain of the Lightning Spear Formation breaking team that was the first to break into the enemy's territory. As long as he was here, the Lightning Spear Formation breaking team would be restored to its former glory. "By the way, Josiah, I want to ask you for a favor." "Ask me for a favor?" Go ahead." Joshua was stunned for a moment before he opened his mouth. Tang En turned to look at little Carol and said, "I want you to take care of little Carol. Yes, we owe Old Bill a favor. This should be done by us. But we're all men, so—" "That's it? No problem." Josiah agreed readily. He walked to the bedside and said, "Carol will be my sister from now on. I will take good care of her." "Brother Twain, you're so thoughtful." Fry sighed. "Then," he said firmly, "I also told a few of my brothers that we will be Carol's uncles from now on. If anyone dares to bully her, they will have to ask the permission of the gun in my hand first." After making this decision, Fry was still affected by the previous news. He was not in a good mood. After a while, he said goodbye. In order not to disturb little Carol's rest, Tang En and the others also walked out of the tent. Looking at Frey's back, Josiah said, "Brother Fry is very impressive. Aunt Luosa also said that she wanted to thank you for bringing back such a talent. Did you know that Aunt Luosa wanted him to lead a regiment first? But Brother Fry said that he would not be rewarded if he did not do anything. He insisted on starting as a soldier. In the end, she finally persuaded him to be a captain. Oh! Tang En nodded. Fry is indeed such a person. Tang En was a little disapproving of Frey's decision. If he started as a soldier, wouldn't it be a waste of his military talent? But Frey's resolute character could not be forced. Fortunately, he had the ability. He would probably be promoted soon. Okay. Josiah nodded. Then, he turned his head and said, Tang En, can I ask you a question? Don't be so polite. Just ask. Oh, Aunt Luosa said yesterday that she would bring me to participate in the negotiation, but I have no idea what to do. Josiah spread his hands. His eyes were full of confusion. Bring Josiah to participate in the negotiation. Tang En's heart skipped a beat. So, Luosa had decided to make Josiah the hero of the Grey Coat Army. In this negotiation, there was no doubt that the Grey Coat Army had the upper hand. In the end, it was just a matter of how much they gained. So, as long as he participated in the negotiation, he would be a hero of the Grey Coat Army. In the future, it would also be a solid capital to rise in rank. Well, Tang En thought quickly and said, this is just like buying something. Now we are the merchants. We have the only bargaining chip in our hand. So, first of all, we must have a domineering attitude. Well, it means that we have to flip the table from time to time. Flip the table. Josiah opened his mouth slightly and hesitated. Isn't that a little impolite? It's just an example. Then, let's change it to slamming the table. Well, make a domineering expression for me to see. Domineering. Josiah tilted his head and thought for a while. Then, his cheeks puffed up. He stared fiercely in front of him. Is it like this? You're here to force me to pay my debt. Tang En rubbed his forehead. Forget it. You just have to sit there quietly, keep a straight face, and look at the other party from time to time. Well, you have to say in your heart, you are a toad. Next, we have to double the conditions that we originally proposed, and add a few conditions that the other party will not agree to. Well, this negotiation will not end so quickly, so we have to keep bargaining. Believe me, we will get more if we do this. Oh, remember. Josiah nodded like a good student. I will go back and think about the specifics. Tang En pinched the bridge of his nose and said, I will teach you some facial expression control in these 2 days. I am good at acting. This was the truth. Acting was a compulsory course for assassins. Okay. Thank you, Tang. Josiah cheered. Tang En waved his hand nonchalantly. It's just a small matter. Well, then I will not disturb you. Josiah suddenly turned his head to look to the right. What's wrong? Oh, nothing. Maybe it was my imagination. I seem to have felt magical waves just now. Josiah said uncertainly. Magical waves? Tang En shrugged. You are the only mage in the Grey Coat Army. Oh yes. I must have felt it wrong. Well, Tang, then I will not disturb your rest. Goodbye. Goodbye. It was already evening. After saying goodbye to Josiah, Tang En walked to his resting place. However, just as he reached the first fork in the road, Tang En suddenly felt something. He glanced over calmly, raised his eyebrows, and strode forward. A moment later, a handsome young man dressed in neat clothes walked out from the shadows of the tunnel. Perhaps it was because of the weather, but his face was a little dark. At this moment, Josiah was mumbling as he walked over slowly. Domineering, yes, domineering. The young man rubbed his face, and the shadows disappeared. He stepped forward, turned around, and smiled like a spring breeze. Hi, Josiah, good evening. You are Toad. His smile froze instantly. This expression, well, it was hard to describe, but it was very loving. Bo, gee, no, I am sorry. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidien. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 223. The most hard-working thing in the world was like the sun. After resting for half a day yesterday, it slowly climbed up from the east today. The members of the gray space did not have the speed of Tang En, so they did not rush back to the camp until dawn. As a result, there was no need to carry out the morning training every day. However, Tang En still could not sleep in, because early in the morning, he was dragged out of the tent by Josiah. Then, the people who woke up early would find the popular Miss Josiah and an ordinary-looking young man staring at each other in the corner of the camp. Both of their faces twitched from time to time, and they looked quite conflicted. What is Miss Josiah doing? Are they angry and quarreling? A peasant woman who was holding washed rice and preparing to cook asked in confusion. Very similar. Damn it, who is that person? What kind of heinous thing did he do? I have never seen Miss Josiah so angry. The burly young man on the other side was full of anger. That can't be right, they didn't say anything. It's over, it's over. Miss Josiah is so angry that she can't even speak. Damn it, he still dares to hit her. The burly young man's eyes were full of fire. He rolled up his sleeves and was ready to teach the abominable guy who dared to provoke his goddess. On the other side, Tang En reached out and rubbed Josiah's face. He said bitterly, "You are so stupid. Oppress, do you understand? I didn't ask you to be in a daze. And why do you keep blinking? It's shameful to act cute. I can't help it. When I look at you, I want to close my eyes." Josiah's face was first red, and then she said with grievance, Are you saying that I'm too horrible to look at? I'm just doing it out of habit. Josiah was able to become a magician, so she was naturally not stupid. After all, the complex and mysterious magic circle and the obscure spells were difficult to remember. If she was not smart, she would not be able to do it. However, a person's cleverness always depended on other aspects. Josiah, who was naturally naive, couldn't handle this rich and even slightly exaggerated acting. Tang En had been teaching for more than half an hour, but the effect was minimal. "Done, you're an assassin. Of course you know about oppression and killing intent. I'm not one, so of course I can't feel it." Assassin? The body of the young man who was walking over and preparing to act courageously for a just cause trembled, and then his footsteps slowed down. "So that's how it is. Here, the person standing in front of you is the murderer of your father that you've caught. Now, prepare to punish him. Come on, glare at me with hatred." "Well, my father is still alive," Josiah said weakly. Tang En touched his forehead and sighed. "Imagine. I'll let you imagine for a while." "Oh!" Josiah pursed his lips and looked at Tang En angrily. However, after a moment, his expression relaxed. "I have a feeling." "Well done, describe it more vividly. You must have extorted a confession before." "I'll refer to it and try again." "Well, let me think. It's too much, this time and a half." Tang En knocked on his head and whispered, Too much." The young man who had already walked to the two shuddered, and his outstretched hand froze in the air. "Well, I've got it." Tang En snapped his fingers and gestured. "First, I'll cover his eyes with a cloth. You know, the unknown is the most frightening thing. Then, I'll slowly cut his body with a dagger. Then, I'll cut his sixth rib from the left. There's a little common sense that you should know. A person's vitality is actually very strong, so it's okay to remove some of his liver, lungs, and kidneys. At this time, I'll untie the cloth, open his eyes, and let him explore the mystery of the human body structure with you." "Oh, how wonderful! What's with your expression? It's not like I'm cutting you, what are you afraid of?" Josiah's face was pale, and his lips trembled. Tang, this is too cruel. The murderer of my father, of course, I have to be ruthless. You are? What's the matter?" Tang En looked at the young man standing next to him, and asked in surprise. I. The young man's expression changed. He withdrew his hand inch by inch and waved stiffly. No, nothing, I'll go first. Wan, good night, Tang turned his head and looked at the rising sun in the east. He blinked inexplicably and was a little confused for a moment. On the other side, the young man had already walked back with mechanical dance step. Tang shrugged and said, How is it? Did you get the feeling? Josiah nodded reluctantly. I'll try. Tang, what you said just now, you didn't really do it, right? This? Of course not, I just imagined it. Haha. Tang touched his nose and smiled innocently. Under this strange teaching method, Josiah's control of his expression and emotions finally improved. Of course, it was not easy to achieve this result because it took the two of them nearly a day. Well, that's it for today. Go back and think about it. Tang waved his hand and announced that today's practice was over. Josiah was relieved and kept patting his cheeks with his hands. He was almost cramping. Well, okay. By the way, little Carol has moved to my place. Her condition is much better. Well, maybe we don't know each other. She doesn't like to talk much. Tang shook his head and sighed. It wasn't like this at first. Sigh, this incident hit her too hard. Oh, I know. Leave it to me. Joshua patted his chest confidently. Don't worry, I'll make sure she's as good as new. I hope so. Then, Teacher Tang, see you tomorrow. Josiah stuck out his tongue with a mischievous face, stroked the robe at his waist, and bowed slightly. Tang was startled and then curled his lips. You like to play tricks, he. Although Josiah was very determined in his promise, she soon failed. It was late at night, close to dawn. Tang, who was sleeping, suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes were clear, without the slightest confusion of just waking up. He turned his head and saw a short black shadow at the entrance of the tent, trying hard to pull off the curtain buckle from the outside. The buckle was just a simple noose. If one shook it up and down skillfully, it could be opened from the outside. The little black shadow seemed to be afraid of waking up the person inside, so it was very careful. Tang raised his eyebrows and silently rolled out of bed. He walked to the curtain and opened it. The other person quickly covered his mouth with his hand, so the exclamation was very short. Carol? Tang lowered his head and opened his mouth in shock. Big Brother Tang, standing outside the curtains, was Carol in her underwear. Her soft hair was disheveled, and her small body shivered from time to time in the cold wind. Her face was still filled with fear. Why are you here? Where's Josiah? You're wearing so little. Where are your shoes? Tang picked Carol up, his heart aching. He found that her little feet had already turned black and gray, and were covered with mud. Wearing shoes will wake up big sister Josiah. Oh, I sneaked here. Carol narrowed her eyes in Tang's arms, seeming to enjoy it very much. Sneaked here? Tang's face was full of shock, but he couldn't care less. He carried little Carol to the bed and wrapped her in 3 layers of blanket. Then, he walked to the side and boiled some water. Carol didn't resist and twisted a few times like a bear. Her dirty little feet dangled outside, seeming to be very happy. Carol, put your feet in. Oh, but it's very dirty. Carol put her calves together and curled up a little. Now you know it's dirty. Tang added some firewood, clapped his hands and stood up. His face was slightly gloomy. Now tell me the reason. You're sick. How can you run out so casually? I don't like it there. Carol pursed her lip. You don't like it? Tang frowned. You don't like big sister Josiah? Oh no. Carol shook her head, and her scattered hair floated in the air. Big sister Josiah is very good, but I can't sleep there. Tang's expression eased a little. He walked to the bed and combed Carol's hair. Will you have nightmares? This was conceivable. After all, little Carol had suffered a lot of trauma before. Ordinary adults might not be able to accept it, let alone a teenage girl. Well, yes. Carol raised her head like a kitten that had been combed. TSK, then what should we do? It's okay. As long as Big Brother Tang-en is by my side, I won't have nightmares. Big Brother Tang-en is very powerful. He can protect me. After saying that, Carol kept nodding, her tone was very certain. Tang-en was dumbfounded. It can't be. What's going on? The water is boiling. Tang-en took out a basin, poured some cold water, and then mixed it with hot water. He pressed Carol's feet in it and washed them. During this time, Tang-en also sorted out his messy thoughts. Carol, how about this? You stay with Big Brother Tang-en for a few days. When you don't have nightmares anymore, you can go back to Big Sister Josiah. How about it? Okay. But what if I have nightmares again after I leave Big Brother Tang-en? Carol's feet seemed to be a little hot. They were very restless. Little Carol's words were not impossible. Tang-en helplessly pinched the bridge of his nose. This was a headache. What should he do? Big Brother Tang-en, why don't I learn some powerful skills from you? If I learn well, I won't be afraid. I heard from Big Sister Josiah that Big Brother David and the others were all taught by you. Then, can I join your ash whatever space? Nonsense. No. Tang-en's face instantly darkened. He then shook his head and patiently persuaded, Big Brother Tang-en, this organization kills people. You can't touch it. You just have to be happy. I, Josiah, Big Brother David, and Uncle Fry will protect you. Carol blinked. She was not frightened. Instead, she said, Big Brother Tang-en, do you kill bad people? Carol, you want the same. No. No matter what you say. Okay, Big Brother Tang-en. No. Okay. The two argued until there was no conclusion. Tang-en, who had a headache, simply picked up Carol, laid her on the pillow, and ordered her to sleep first. Phew! After doing all this, Tang-en found a chair and sat down. He let out a long sigh of relief. Big Brother Tang-en, I can do it! A muffled voice came from under the blanket. Don't even think about it. Go to sleep. Oh! If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidien. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 224. The next morning, the sky was slightly bright. Little Carol still looked like she was sleeping soundly, so Tang-en didn't wake her up. After going out, he first went to Josiah, who hadn't fully woken up yet. But after hearing Tang-en's words, Josiah quivered and was completely shocked awake. Only then did he realize that little Carol was gone. The bedding on the bed was still in the shape of an arch bridge, as if someone was sleeping inside. Needless to say, Josiah looked shocked, embarrassed, and ashamed. In fact, mages were not that sensitive to the movements around them because they weren't good at close combat. But it was mainly because Josiah didn't expect little Carol to do this. Otherwise, he would have set up a small alert spell at the door, and he would have discovered Carol's little trick immediately. After comforting Josiah, who was blaming himself, Tang-en turned and walked to the entrance of the encampment. When he got there, except for those who were seriously injured, all the members of the gray space were there. Pack a full bag of sand. Yes. David and the others nodded, then untied their backpacks and began to pour in the soil from the mound. Stones were naturally more effective when carrying heavy loads, but they didn't have any here, so they had to use soil instead. About a few minutes later, everyone carried their full backpacks on their shoulders. Tang-en didn't check and waved for everyone to start their morning run. When the gray space was first established, there were still some people who wanted to be sneaky. But after the previous pursuit and seeing the improvement of their own strength, they were now following Tang-en's instructions to the letter. Boss. At this moment, David suddenly opened his mouth and pointed behind Tang-en with a shocked expression. Tang-en turned his head in surprise, his eyes widening in an instant and his head full of black lines. 100 meters behind him, a small figure carrying a scythe taller than her ran over quickly. Seeing Tang-en turn his head, she raised the scythe with both hands and waved it in his direction. This was little Carol, who had been sleeping soundly when Tang En went out just now. Huff, huff, huff. Little Carol ran to the petrified people with a red face and gasped, "Good morning, Brother Tang En, Brother David, Brother Michaud. Good morning." "Good morning." David scratched his head with a strange expression. The corner of Tang En's eyes twitched a few times. He reached out and grabbed little Carol's scythe. He looked it up and down. It had a wooden hilt and a black iron body. It was quite heavy in his hand. He rubbed the edge of the blade. It was bright and shiny. Obviously, it had just been sharpened. He roared, "Damn it! Who made this scythe for you?" Little Carol shrank her head and whispered, "Brother Tang En, I asked Grandpa Blacksmith to call me last night." It turned out that after Carol slipped out of Josiah's place last night, she didn't just run to Tang En's place. Before that, she had asked the patrolling guards and found out about the Gray Coat Army's smithy. After knocking on the other party's door, she asked for a scythe in the name of Tang En. Although the blacksmith was puzzled, he didn't dare to neglect it. Who was Tang En? He was the captain of the Gray Space. Although the recent news about the Gray Space was mixed, one thing was certain. The Gray Space was not to be trifled with, and Captain Tang En was even more so. Besides, the other party only asked for a scythe, so the old blacksmith readily agreed and asked Carol to pick it up tomorrow morning. Phew! Tang En exhaled a long breath of fresh air and looked down at little Carol's expectant eyes. "You really put in a lot of effort." Judging from the current situation, little Carol's request to learn from Tang En last night was premeditated. She said it before just to give him a heads-up. Moreover, she also expected that Tang En wouldn't agree, so she directly acted first and reported later. For such a small brain to come up with such a plan, what else could it be other than putting in a lot of effort? "Okay." Tang En nodded expressionlessly and said coldly, "Since you want to learn so much, I'll agree. But I'll say this first. The training in the Gray Space is very tough. If you can't withstand it, don't ask me for this again in the future." Little Carol's face lit up with joy at first, then she replied firmly, "Okay, I got it. Thank you, Brother Tang En." Tang En didn't say anything. He waved his hand and said, "Let's go." Yes. David and the others straightened their bodies and immediately started running outside. Little Carol carried the scythe and quickly followed behind. Since it was Tang En's request, the blacksmith naturally made the scythe according to adult standards. Now that little Carol picked it up, she could only carry it on her shoulder. Of course, there were people standing guard outside the Gray Coat Army's encampment. When the Gray Space ran here, they realized that it was Frey's team. Fry originally wanted to go forward and say hello, but when he saw little Carol following behind, his eyeballs almost fell to the ground. Then, he stood there in a daze with his hands raised, staring blankly at Tang En and the others running over. The empty eastern valley was covered in a thin fog. From afar, it looked like a halo surrounding the surroundings, but when you ran over, you would find that the fog ring was still in front of you. The road after the rain was naturally not easy to walk on. There were many muddy puddles. However, the members of the Gray Space acted as if they didn't see it and still walked straight through. "Damn it, did you all turn into turtles after sleeping? Run for me. Run." "Yes." After David and the others finished shouting, they looked behind hesitantly, then looked at the frosty Tang En and couldn't help but speed up. They had just started running, so of course they wouldn't run out of stamina. The reason why David and the others were doing this was to wait for little Carol behind them. Although Carol's 2 legs were running fast, she was short after all, and her steps were small. She had to run 4 or 5 steps to match 1 step of David and the others. As a result, she was naturally left behind. Now that David and the others had sped up, little Carol couldn't keep up. After a while, the figures of the entire Gray Space disappeared into the thin fog. Little Carol didn't care. She just lowered her head and ran while biting her lip, her large scythe swinging back and forth on her shoulder. The Gray Space's morning exercise distance was 7 kilometers. It wasn't that they didn't want to run more, but after running here, the army's encampment was in front of them. The army's soldiers were already used to this training method. The first time they saw it, these soldiers were as if they were facing a great enemy, but they knew that the other party was an arrow's distance away and automatically returned. Later, when they ran again, the army's soldiers watched with the mentality of watching a show. No one thought that this was useful. Running? Was it to run faster when escaping? Haha. 10 minutes later, the Gray Spaces team arrived at the army's encampment. As the soldiers pointed at them, they returned. At this time, they didn't slow down. It was only a few kilometers. Compared to the dozens of kilometers they ran before, it really paled in comparison. However, 10 minutes later, they gradually slowed down and looked at each other. Where was she? A little Carol was running behind them. No matter how slow she was, they should have seen her by now. Now that they couldn't see her, there were only two explanations. One was that little Carol went back, and the other was that little Carol ran astray. Judging from little Carol's stubborn personality, the second possibility was undoubtedly the most likely. Boss! David leaned close to Tang En, wanting to say something but hesitating. Shut up, Tang En said with a dark expression. Then, he paused. Lead everyone back to the camp. Yes. Although he was reprimanded, David still happily agreed. After everyone left, Tang En's figure quickly spread out, sweeping around the surroundings. After observing the traces on the ground, he headed south. Little Carol had indeed run astray. She had her head down, and it was her first time running, so it was normal for her to run astray. At this time, her scythe had shifted from her right shoulder to her left shoulder. After running for a while, it shifted to her right shoulder, and then to her left shoulder. Huff, 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 plop. Finally, during one of the shifts, little Carol's figure tilted, and she fell to the ground. The curved scythe rolled a few times and fell in front of her. This happened to be a depression, so the dirty water immediately splashed all over her. Pay, pay. Carol kept wiping her mouth with her hand. Then, she looked up. There was still a misty halo around her. There was no one at all. The feeling of being the only one left in the world naturally wasn't pleasant. Big Brother Tang En. The crisp voice didn't travel far before disappearing. Little Carol bit her lower lip and climbed up from the depression. She took a few steps forward and picked up the scythe that had suddenly become very heavy. She gestured twice but still couldn't carry it on her shoulder. In the end, she simply dragged it behind her and jogged. Chee, 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 the scythe slid across the water, the grass, and the muddy ground, leaving a straight trail. Occasionally, it would bump into some small stones, which would make a monotonous tinkling sound. The north and south sides of the station were steep and unclimbable mountains. After running for more than half an hour, the exhausted little Carol couldn't help but be stunned when she saw the mountain behind the fog. Then, she turned her head and looked behind her. At this time, she knew she had run astray and was now lost. Even adults would panic after getting lost, let alone a 10-year-old child. Little Carol looked around blankly. At this time, she had two choices. One was to turn her head and look for traces of where she came from. This way, she might be able to go back. The second was to continue running, but she didn't know where her destination was. After hesitating for a while, little Carol still went east along the mountain peak. At this time, she didn't have the strength to run anymore. She could only drag the scythe and stagger forward. There was no purpose, no direction, and no one else in the empty misty valley. There was only a small figure walking alone. The only thing accompanying her was the scythe. Loneliness was scary, but what was even scarier was the fear that came with it. Any sound would make little Carol stop and look around. At this time, in her eyes, the surrounding mist turned into tigers, hungry wolves, and so on. I'm lost, I'm lost. This place is so big. Big Brother Tang En definitely can't find me. I'm going to be eaten by wolves, taken away by bad people, starved to death. Wah. Woo woo. The sound of crying finally sounded. In the end, she was just a child. In this situation, what else could she do other than cry? But despite her fear, little Carol still stubbornly walked forward while wiping her tears. Woo-woo. I'm not afraid of you. Woo-woo, come on, big bad wolf. I have a scythe. I'm not afraid of you. Woo-woo, please, don't come, I'm not tasty. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidien. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 225. Behind every multiple choice, there was an inevitable result. Civilians did not have many choices. Being born meant that they were at the bottom of society and had to do some heavy labor. They basically had no access to fighting energy, magic, or other things that could improve their strength. Therefore, they might face an ordinary life. They might also face oppression and exploitation and silently endure it. Or they might face situations where they or their family members were bullied and they were powerless to fight back. But what if they had a certain amount of power? Could they avoid the above bad situations? That might not be the case. The more powerful you are, the more trouble you will cause. That is for sure. After all, with power, one would have ambition and rely on this kind of direct and violent method to solve problems. The consequences of this method were often more intense. Unless you were number one in the world, you would face constant fighting and dispute. If there was peace and stability, who would be willing to struggle for survival? Of these two choices, Tang En had no choice but to walk the path of the latter, but he did not want little Carol to do the same. Whether it was out of his own will or because of old Bill's dying wish. Tang En did not want little Carol to be like him, with her hands covered in blood and countless wailing souls on her weapon, and then one day in the future, she would also become a soul on someone else's weapon. But looking at the young figure in front of him who was constantly staggering forward, Tang En vaguely felt that his thoughts might fall through. He had followed behind Carol for a long time, watching her fall, watching her blankness, watching her fear, watching her cry. In the end, he prayed that little Carol would give up, but in the end, this stubborn little girl still chose to move forward regardless. Huff! Tang En took a deep breath of the fog. The cold feeling instantly cleared his mind, and then he slowly exhaled. Ahead was the army's checkpoint. Little Carol took a big detour and finally arrived here. The fog was slightly thinner, and the soldiers on the other side also discovered this little girl who was dragging a scythe and seemed a little confused. A few soldiers approached. Of course, they did not want to do anything, but since they were here, they had to get to the bottom of this. Seeing them approach, little Carol hurriedly turned and retreated. In the hearts of children, there was not much difference between strangers and bad people. Ah! As soon as she turned around, little Carl's panicked expression disappeared and was replaced with joy. Big brother Tang En. The corners of Tang En's mouth twitched as he forced a smile. Then, he picked up little Carol who had rushed over. Wah, I was so scared. I thought I would never see brother Tang En again. Boo-hoo, don't be afraid. Big brother Tang En will always be by your side. Tang En stroked little Carol's soft hair, waved at the approaching soldiers, and instantly retreated into the fog. On the way back, little Carol gradually calmed down after her excitement. Then, she secretly glanced at the thoughtful Tang En from the corner of her eye. Big brother Tang En. Little Carol whispered timidly. If you don't like Carol like this, then I won't do it in the future. Tang En lowered his head and looked at little Carol, who was holding the sickle with her right hand and pinching her clothes with her left hand. She looked a little dejected. He chuckled and said, Can you tell big brother Tang En why you want to learn this? I. Little Carol stuttered, then finally looked up and said, I want to kill all the bad people. Tang En was startled when he heard this. He couldn't help but touch his nose. A sense of absurdity filled his heart. What a great, boring dream. Assassins didn't seem to be good people either. Ahem, the bad people you're talking about are those bandits and robbers? Little Carol nodded and said firmly, It's them. Phew, that's good, that's good. Tangan wiped his forehead and immediately thought of the reason why little Carol did this. It was probably because the scene of her village being destroyed and her mother being killed in front of her eyes was too stimulating. However, although this goal was small, but it wasn't that small. Bandits and robbers were everywhere in the north. There were too many to count and too many to kill. Even the Bran officials didn't eliminate them, let alone this little girl who was struggling to drag the sickle. Okay. Tang En finally agreed. I'll allow you to train with the Gray Space Team in the future. Really? Yeah. Little Carol ran 2 steps forward, waving her sickle and jumping up and down happily. Whoosh, Tang En was stunned. He subconsciously raised his hand and caught the scythe flying toward him. The curved blade was only a few inches away from his eyes. Cold sweat instantly dripped down his forehead. Although the profession of an assassin required him to be constantly vigilant of the approaching danger, this kind of danger, who could he reason with? Big brother Tang En, be careful. Little Carol's face was full of horror. Her warning came too late. Phew. Tang En waved his hand and said solemnly, Carol, although I promised you, there are conditions. Before I acknowledge your strength, you're not allowed to fight with others. Do you understand? Oh, Carol understands. After this interlude, the two continued to walk to the base. But at this time, little Carol was much more lively. She jumped up and down, and from time to time, she would see small flowers in the wild and pick them for Tang En as if they were treasures. Tang En smiled and put the flowers on little Carol's head. Hee. Carol, can Big Brother ask you a question? Sure. Why do you use a sickle as a weapon? No reason. What do I use if not a sickle? Okay. Aren't you quite cheerful now? Why do you like to talk in front of others? Because I like Big Brother Tang En. After about 10 minutes, the two returned to the base. At this time, the smoke had completely dispersed, and Dongfang Shuri's face was completely revealed. Tang En introduced little Carol to Fry and the others and let her recognize these uncles. Tang En also told Fry about little Carol's decision. The latter also disagreed. He had been on the battlefield all his life and knew the value of a stable life. But after listening to Tang En's story, he finally nodded helplessly. After all, even if they didn't want to teach her, according to little Carol's stubborn personality, she would find someone else. In that case, it would be better to let Tang En take care of her. At this time, it was just time for breakfast. While eating breakfast, Tang En gave today's training program to the Gray Space. He asked David and Michaud to each lead a group of people to track and kill in the wild. After breakfast, Tang En sent little Carol back to her tent and told her not to go anywhere. After all, she had just recovered from a cold. As for little Carol's training program, Tang En needed to think about it carefully. Whether it was for protection or selfishness, Tang En decided to find time to ask the omnipotent old butler about how to attack with a sickle. If an unorthodox weapon was used well, it could often catch people off guard, so Tang En didn't plan to teach little Carol the dagger attack he was best at. Yes, and he had the Tide mantra. Of course, it was already a high-level mantra. As long as she practiced it well, she could definitely become a high-level warrior. But Tang En still wanted to find some better mantras that were more suitable for little Carol. TSK, where should he find them? While thinking, Tang En arrived outside Josiah's tent. Like Tang En, she had her own independent space. One was because of the level of authority, and the other was because magicians needed to meditate quietly and couldn't be disturbed. Here, Tang En raised his eyebrows. Josiah was talking to a handsome young man outside the tent. Tang En also knew that person. It was Borg, who had a conflict with him before. Tang En was suspicious about Bol's death. If he wasn't in a hurry to fulfill old Bill's last wish, Tang En would have waited for 2 more days to dig Bol's grave after he was buried. Of course, it wasn't too late to do this now. As for Borg, Tang En was now suspicious of him. After all, he really didn't have any grudges with Bol. Their only connection was Borg, who knew each other. But why? Previously, the two of them could be considered friends in adversity. Even if their relationship was ordinary, it wouldn't be to the point of killing him for no reason. Looking at the two laughing people in front of him, Tang En's heart suddenly moved. Then, he touched his nose. Could it be another femme fatale? That seemed to be the most likely possibility. But it couldn't be. Previously it was Winston. Now it was Borg. If it was really something, Tang En would admit it. But now it was just a few kisses. The kind that didn't even stick out their tongues. Hey Tang, you're here. Josiah looked up and saw Tang En standing in the distance. Borg, who had his back facing him, trembled and his expression changed instantly. Tang En shrugged and walked over. He raised his hand and greeted, "Yes, Josiah, good morning." Borg suddenly chuckled and turned his head with a normal expression. "Brother Tang, good morning." Twain was stunned when he heard that. Borg spoke again. "I'm sorry, Brother Tang. Uncle actually committed suicide. I was too impulsive last time. Please forgive me. Tsk. Tang En came back to his senses. He curled his lips and smiled. "It's okay. I was in the wrong at that time too. Please forgive me, Brother Borg. There's a problem." If Borg had shown anger or sullenness on his face, Tang En's suspicions would have lessened a little. But his expression was normal. Tsk. You saw me the night before. Why didn't you apologize then?" I've decided. I'll go dig up the grave tonight." "Brother Tang, you're too serious." Borg quickly helped Tang En up. "Haha," Josiah laughed happily. "It's great that you guys can be like this. We're still good friends." Yes." Tang En smiled and nodded, seeming to agree with Josiah. Good my foot. This silly girl. Oh right, what were you guys talking about just now?" "Oh, Borg is also a candidate for this negotiation. We've been discussing countermeasures recently," Josiah explained. "Borg too?" Tang En was a little surprised. But then he remembered that he had seen Minister Bosco before and was relieved. The credit for the negotiation was obvious. There was no reason not to fight for his own child. So, it was an era where one's father depended on one's status. "Then Borg, I'll go and learn negotiation skills with Tang first." Yes, you can come along too," Josiah said excitedly. "Tang really knows a lot. We can definitely learn something useful." Borg's expression froze, then he waved his hand and said, "I still have some things to deal with today. I won't go." Borg actually wanted to go. Of course, it was not to learn negotiation skills, but to prevent Josiah and Tang En from having a chance to be alone. But he was really worried that his resentment would be seen through by Tang En, so he had to refuse. "Oh," Josiah responded regretfully and sighed. "In that case, we'll go first. See you later, Borg." Goodbye. Brother Tang, goodbye." Borg gave a simple salute to the two of them, then stepped away. Tang En looked at Borg's back and narrowed his long and narrow eyes. "This is a little interesting. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Chidien. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation." Chapter 226. After sending Borg off, Tang En and Josiah went to the secluded corner from yesterday and continued their training. It could be seen that Josiah had been thinking about it since he went back yesterday, so his control of his expression was not as stiff as before. Of course, in the eyes of Tang En, who was in the know, there were still many flaws. However, it should be enough to deal with the upcoming negotiators. After all, they were not familiar with Josiah. At most, they would think that this girl with good temperament in front of them was a little expressionless. After spending some time correcting the small flaws in his expression, Tang En began to talk about the knowledge of negotiation in detail. Of course, this was all from the old butler. Negotiation is actually a game. First of all, you must not panic. Don't worry, the other party is more passive than us. Not to mention that this is not a real negotiation, but a one-sided blackmail. Yes, blackmail. Put aside all the hypocrisy, you are now a pirate taking hostages. If the other party does not pay enough ransom, don't think about letting them go. The specific things will be done by Leader Lhasa and a few ministers. What you need to do is to listen quietly and then show your attitude at the right time. Principles are the most important. Upholding them requires you to be tough or unreasonable. I think the other party will be cunning people who often deal with politics. It is absolutely impossible to argue with them. So when the other party changes the topic, you have to stand up and reiterate your principles. I said before that this negotiation will not end so soon, but there will be changes if it is delayed, so there must be a deadline. If the other party drags on, you can say, "Well, those noble young people have not eaten for a few days. We can wait, but I can't guarantee that those people can wait." This will make them angry. Josiah could not help but laugh. This is the effect I want. After talking about some things to take note of, Tang En looked up and down at Josiah and snapped his fingers. "Black, you?" Josiah opened his mouth slightly and looked at his white robe. Then, as if he thought of something, he suddenly hugged his shoulders and looked at Tang En with shame and anger. "Tang, you, how can you, like this?" Like what? I just said that you wear black." Tang En was stunned and spread his hands in confusion. "You're still talking?" Josiah's expression was even more embarrassed. He directly squatted down with his arms crossed. Tang En said innocently, "I'm saying that your appearance needs to be changed to black, so that it matches your cold and calm temperament." Joshua was stunned for a moment before he covered his face. The jade-like face between her fingers was as red as blood, as if it was about to drip down. "What's wrong?" "Nothing, nothing." Amidst the questions and answers, the sky unknowingly darkened. "Finally, if the other party is not willing to ask for compensation, send someone to talk to me. Well, I'll use some tricks." At this point, Tang En laughed twice. "I'll make sure they remember it for life." "You're laughing so sinisterly." "A professional habit. You know what I mean." Twain spread his hands. "Ha." Josiah chuckled twice and then pursed his lips. "Tang, actually, if you go, the effect will be much better than me. I don't know anything, that's why you have to learn." Tang En pointed to himself. "I don't have much patience. If I go, I might kill them if they quarrel." "You're talking nonsense again." Tang En helplessly touched his nose. "Why is it that when I tell the truth, no one believes me?" "Don't think too much. Leader Luosa wants you to go, she naturally has her reasons. Besides, I'm the one who caught these noble youths. If I'm at the scene, wouldn't these victims come knocking on my door? You know, these people are very rich. If they pay tens of thousands of gold coins to buy my life. I'm not afraid, but it's tiring to come out every night to pick up corpses." "Haha, that makes sense." "That's right, I'm a meticulous person." "Shameless." Josiah recovered his relaxed expression and made a face. Tang En cooperated and made a helpless expression. Of course, this was not the reason why he did not participate in the negotiation. Since he had already rejected Luosa's heroic mission, there was no need for him to take the credit. After all, only one hero was needed. "All right, it should be time for dinner. Let's go, let's go." Tang En jumped down the passage and called out, "Yes, I'm coming." After saying that, Joshua was about to jump down, but he suddenly stopped in his tracks. Then, with a cry, he fell down. With Tang En below, she naturally would not fall. However, at this time, Tang En was also a little stunned. Looking at the fluttering robe, 3 words suddenly appeared in his mind. Black. Although his mind was distracted, his body had already reflexively made a move. He turned sideways and smoothly pulled Josiah into his arms. "What, are you going to show me your unique skill of landing face first?" "Ah? No. Josiah scrambled to get up, then frowned and looked to the south of the camp. It's magic wave again. Tang Yen frowned. Magic wave? Josiah nodded. Yes, it's magic wave. I can't be wrong. Strange, are there still magicians in the camp? The wave is still there? Can you pinpoint its location? Josiah was a magician, so naturally, there was no mistaking it. Besides, this was the second time it had appeared. Tang Yen suddenly felt uneasy. It's still there. Josiah raised his head and opened his arms. He muttered, the magic wave radiates to the surroundings. I can only feel it scattered. I can only pinpoint the direction. Yes, it should be over there. Josiah opened his eyes and raised his hand, pointing to a place in the south. Boom! Just a few hundred meters to the left of where Josiah was pointing, there was suddenly a loud roar, followed by flames and rolling air waves. Colorful pieces of cloth were thrown into the air. It was a tent. That place. Tang Yen and Josiah looked at each other. Captives. Oh no! F***ck. Twain's figure flashed in an instant and disappeared into the twilight. Then a voice came from afar. Josiah, go inform Leader Losha. Josiah's speed was not fast. After running a few steps to the south, he heard the voice, stamped his feet, and ran east. Enemy attack! Enemy attack! A long roar came faintly from afar. Then, the south side of the Grey Coat Army's encampment was set ablaze, and from time to time, there were explosions. After all, this was a place where tens of thousands of people lived. The encampment was not small. In addition to the tunnel that had already been dug, it could be said that when spread out, it was several times bigger than the army's camp. Tang Yen's feet tapped lightly on the soil in the tunnel, and his body swept forward like the wind. At the same time, his mind was working quickly. There was no doubt that there were uninvited guests in the encampment, and their purpose was to kidnap the noble youths. But how did they get in? The Grey Coat Army's defense was not impenetrable, but it was definitely not easy for people to come and go as they pleased. According to the level of chaos there were at least a few hundred people causing trouble at the same time. How did they do it? Forget it. Tang Yen quickly cleared his mind. The most important thing now was to not let the other party kidnap the group of noble youth. Otherwise, without the captives, the army soldiers 10 miles away would instantly press down on them without any scruples. At that time, the Grey Coat Army would not be far from being destroyed. Tang Yen's previous position was in the western corner. Now that he was running, he was almost at the southern edge of the encampment. The soldiers of the Grey Coat Army were also urgently mobilized. Under Tang Yen's feet, rows of soldiers swarmed forward in the tunnel. Clang, 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 bang, bang, bang at the edge, the sound of weapons clashing, shouts, and screams could be heard incessantly. Tang Yen looked down from above and saw that in the tunnel ahead, there were about 10 people in black armor blocking the intersection. 5 people in a row, they blocked the Grey Coat Army soldiers who were rushing over. He looked around and saw that the situation was the same at several intersections. Although there were only about 10 people on the other side, they were firmly stuck there like a mainstay. The anxious Grey Coat Army soldiers kept attacking, but the other party's skills were obviously much higher. In addition to the narrow terrain, the soldiers who came up were all cut down. Tang Yen thought for a moment and directly stepped into the tunnel, intending to cross it from above. This was not important. The key was to block the group of noble youths as soon as possible. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Unexpectedly, as soon as he stepped into the tunnel, the men in black armor who were assisting in the attack took out their crossbows and shot at him. The bowstrings vibrated and the arrows whistled. F***ck. Tang Yen could tell from the sound that this was definitely a high-quality crossbow. Helpless, he rolled sideways into the tunnel. At this moment, 2 men in black armor threw away their crossbows and ran over with sabers in their hand. Tang Yen flipped over and stood up. With a shake of his hand, he flashed his dagger and rushed forward. He had to break through this place as soon as possible. The two men in black armor were obviously proficient in cooperating in battle. They swung their sabers at him from left and right. Ding, ding, ding. As soon as they exchanged blows, Tang Yen's heart sank. These people's fighting skills were extremely skillful. Their sabers were aimed at his vital point. It was obvious that the soldiers of the army could not compare to them. Tang Yen was not worried about not being able to defeat them, but the Grey Coat army soldiers would not be able to break through in a short time. After a slight understanding of the other party's strength, Tang Yen decisively used his killer move. As the dagger trembled, a torrential rain of blood suddenly enveloped them. Hiss, hiss, hiss. The two men in black armor barely blocked a few attacks and fell into a passive state. Then, they were pushed back by the bloodlight. At the same time, the leather armor on their bodies was broken everywhere. Traces of blood poured out like a thin curtain. Bang! Bang! In a moment, the two figures were squeezed to the sides of the tunnel. They collapsed along the earth wall, their bodies twitching from time to time. Russell, taking advantage of this opportunity, Tang Yen rushed forward and jumped to the south of the encampment. Then, he landed on the ground and disappeared into the tunnel. The men in black armor turned to look but did not chase after him. Obviously, their mission was to stay here and prevent the soldiers from entering. Whoosh, 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 flames danced wildly in the air like snakes. The encampment became even more chaotic. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 227. It was late at night and dusk had fallen. Usually, this was the time for the Grey Coat army to eat. It would be bustling with noise and laughter. But now, flames soared into the sky, and shouts of killing could be heard everywhere. The chaos came very suddenly, and no one knew how these hundreds of people came in. They only knew that when the explosion sounded, some of the surrounding people suddenly drew their swords and charged into the crowd. There were more soldiers on the east and west sides of the Grey Coat army's encampment. That was because they had to guard against the attacks of the legions and lords. The south was mainly for logistics, such as the wounded barracks, where the captives were held, and so on. Of course, there were also soldiers here, but the ratio was smaller. After Tang Yen broke through the outer blockade and entered the interior, he saw that there was fighting everywhere. The black-armored men were either alone or in groups of 2 or 3. They guarded the various points of the passage, keeping the Grey Coat army soldiers outside. Although the number of people was scattered and the fighting was not organized, Tang Yen could still see the knack behind the chaos from above. The black-armored men were actually distributed in an irregular circle, forming a line of defense that cut the Grey Coat army's southern encampment horizontally and vertically. In the center of this circle was the most chaotic place. Through the flames, he could see a group of people killing their way to a certain place in the west. That was. Tang Yen looked in the direction. The captive camp? Were they trying to break through there and rescue the captured legions? No. Tang Yen quickly rejected this idea. Even with the help of these captives, they could not break out of the encampment. Boom! Just as Tang Yen was deep in thought, a mound of dirt nearby suddenly exploded. Then, the surrounding tents were quickly set ablaze, and more than a dozen civilians rushed out of the fire in panic. However, they were greeted by a laughing black-armored man and a black crystal-like object. Wow, good evening, everyone. Boom. Waves of air rolled, and the mound collapsed. A deep pit appeared on the ground, but the dozen or so civilians disappeared. Explosive crystal? Damn it. Tang Yen recognized this thing. The last time he saw it was in Mjolnir, but this time it was a smaller version. After the black-armored man ignited the place, he didn't bother with the soldiers who were charging at him. Instead, he quickly moved away. Clearly, his mission was to create chaos. Do you think you can escape? Hurry up and activate. His figure instantly pulled out a string of afterimages, and the dagger whistled as it pounced towards the back of the black armor man. The black armored man reacted quickly. Hearing the whistling of the wind behind him, his body leaned forward and quickly fell to the ground. Hiss! The dagger swept past his head, and Tang En furrowed his brows and stepped down with his foot. Bang! The black armored man, who was about to turn around, fell to the ground in a sorry state. Hiss! The sound of the wind rose again. The black armored man quivered and quickly rolled back with his hands on the ground. Then, a curved blade appeared in his hand. Without even looking at it, the curved blade light slashed in front of him. Ding! With a spark, the two figures were almost stuck together. In such a narrow distance, any weapon would be useless. Horizontal slashes, elbows, collisions, a series of smooth and deadly moves were continuously made. In just a few seconds, the outcome of the entanglement between the two was decided. Tang En clamped down on the black armored man's hands and pressed his face against the wall. Bang, bang, bang! After a few collisions, Tang En waved his hand and threw the man to the ground. Who are you? This person's skills were much better than the two people he had killed before. Tang En was now even more certain that this wasn't a soldier of the army. Huff, puff, huff, puff. The black armored man spat out the dirt in his mouth and gasped for breath. Ha! I'm your father. Go to hell. Before he finished speaking, a black light flashed from his right hand, and he directly pressed it against his chest. Before he could make contact, a pair of large hands had already firmly grabbed his wrist and twisted. Gotcha! And, with a muffled groan, the black armored man raised his left hand without hesitation. Gotcha! 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 Tang En simply broke both of his arms at the shoulders. Huff, huff, huff. Ha! Don't think you can get anything out of me. The black armored man's face was full of mud and sweat. Tang En didn't deny it and immediately took out 3 black explosive crystals. If that's the case, Pa. He reached out and removed the black armored man's chin, pinched it up, and stuffed the 3 crystals in. Then I won't ask. With a faint voice, Tang En lifted the black armored man and took a few steps forward. He slapped the back of the man's head with his bloody palm and threw him out. His body flew into the air and crashed into a passageway guarded by 3 black armored men. Boom! The power of the 3 explosive crystals was huge, and the surrounding passages were directly flattened. After opening a gap, Tang En quickly rushed in. Follow me. The surrounding soldiers were stunned and immediately swarmed in. If there was no need to bring people when they were in a hurry, then after entering, they had to think of a way to gather some forces. After all, these black armored men weren't weak, and breaking through layer by layer was too slow. You are? I'm the 4th of the 2nd Battalion of the Swordsman's Camp. Gray Space Tang En. Without waiting for the other party to finish his introduction, Tang En directly said his identity. The platoon leader was stunned, then stood up straight and saluted. Yes, sir. Since it was a team, there had to be a leader. Only then could they exert their full strength. Although Tang En's Gray Space team was small in number, it was still at the level of a division. In addition, he had recently made great contributions and was in the limelight. This platoon of swordsmen was naturally willing to follow his command. Good, follow me. Tang En's command was very simple, but it was also the most suitable for the current situation. They were now racing against time, and the soldiers inside wouldn't be able to hold on for long. After advancing for 100 meters, they encountered a small group of soldiers attacking 2 black armored men at the intersection. Although they had the advantage in numbers, the corpses lying on the ground were all soldiers' bodies. If it weren't for the 2 black armored men guarding the road, the remaining 10 or so people would have been slaughtered. Get out of the way! Tang En rushed over like a whirlwind, waving his dagger and attacking directly. Hiss, 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 clang, clang. Their war blades fell to the ground, and the 2 black armored men covered their slashed wrists in shock. Tang En didn't care at all and passed through the 2 of them. When the platoon leader saw this, he immediately shouted excitedly, "Kill them!" Dozens of large swords were swung in an instant, and the injured black-armored men naturally couldn't withstand it. Blood spurted out, and they were instantly cut to the ground. After killing these two men, the group of swordsmen immediately chased after Tang En. The 10 or so soldiers from before saw the black-armored men that they couldn't defeat being slaughtered in an instant, and they all stood there stupidly. Then, they came back to their senses and hurriedly followed. When these people ran to the next intersection, they also saw 3 black-armored men lying on the wall with their arms and thighs cut. "Ha, brothers, let's go!" Under Tang En's lead, this group of soldiers went straight to the central hinterland like a hot knife through butter. At the same time, their team gradually grew stronger after absorbing the scattered soldiers on the road. This battle was so satisfying. They almost didn't need to use much strength to kill the black-armored men that they had previously regarded as devils. At the same time, they were also secretly shocked by Tang En's strength. When they heard that the gray space had made such a great contribution, they were more or less unconvinced, thinking that it was just good luck. But now, it seemed that it was only natural. Other than guarding the main road, some of the black-armored men who launched the surprise attack were also fighting on the move. So, the movement here was quickly noticed, and a large group of black-armored men began to gather. Tang En's breakthrough began to be hindered. After all, these people were not weak, and some of them were good at cooperating. On his side, he was fighting alone. Seeing this, Tang En decisively said to the soldiers behind him, "I'll lead them away. You guys continue to break through." After saying that, he feinted and directly jumped over the wall. The black-armored men's attention was all on Tang En. As for the ordinary soldiers, they didn't care about them, so they immediately chased after him. Since they were already here, the soldiers were ready to risk it all. The squadron leader roared, "Brothers, it's up to us now. Kill them. Even if we have to sacrifice our lives, we must make a path. Kill, kill, kill." The soldiers raised their weapons and rushed forward like a torrent. On the battlefield, the difference in strength didn't matter. The key was the aura. Previously, they were shocked by the black-armored men's skills and were a little hesitant to attack. But now that they had killed so many, they had built up a psychological advantage. These people were not invincible, nor were they unkillable. They all had a head on their shoulders. Who was afraid of who on this side? Tang En stopped breaking through and began to run around. The black-armored men behind him gradually began to see how terrifying Tang En was. Corners, turns, shadows. Every place became a battlefield for assassinations. Not only did they fail to catch up, but they also suffered casualties. Speed up, shake them off, hide, and kill in one shot. This was the fighting style Tang En was most familiar with. If not for the fact that he was in a hurry to break through, Tang En was confident that he could kill all the black-armored men behind him. Damn it, this won't do. After failing to encircle him again and losing one of his men, a burly black-armored man said angrily, "This person is AF King Assassin. If we continue to chase him like this, we'll definitely be killed one by one." "Then what do you think we should do?" the black-armored man asked. "Anyway, I don't agree with the encirclement. This person is too fast. If this continues, I'll take my men and withdraw. Although the bounty is high, we need to be alive to spend it. Call for backup. Let Goshawk kill him." Goshawk. The remaining black-armored men trembled, then agreed. "All right, let's do that." Seeing that everyone agreed, the burly black-armored man took out something and threw it into the air. Whoosh bang! A ray of blood-red light shot up and instantly exploded in the air. Spots of light flickered and finally formed the shape of an arrow. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 228. The number of recommendation tickets for raccoons is too shabby. I sincerely hope that all of you can leave your recommendation tickets for me every day. Thank you. South of the encampment, the center of the chaos. A group of black-armored men surrounded the dozen or so noble youths, constantly advancing forward. Although there were many gray-coat army soldiers coming to intercept them, they were unable to slow down their speed. "Haha, break for me!" Chi. A huge red blade, like a crescent moon, broke through the air and cut into the middle of the soldiers gathered in front. Hiss! Under such powerful fighting energy, the armor of the soldiers in front was instantly torn apart like paper. The blade continued to advance, penetrating 4 or 5 rows of soldiers. Haha! Explode! Boom! The red blade that had lost its momentum suddenly shone brightly and directly exploded in the crowd. Suddenly, fighting energy overflowed and waves of air rolled. Blood poured like rain, and broken limbs flew like catkins. Haha, this is the feeling. Awesome, too awesome. A burly man in black armor spread his arms like he was standing on top of a mountain, his face full of enjoyment. To him, the rain of blood was like a fresh morning breeze in the mountains. "Oliver, you big pervert!" With a delicate shout, a blonde woman next to the burly man with a seductive figure leaped away like a mountain cat, avoiding the hot blood. "Commander, don't you care about him?" The woman who retreated narrowed her eyes and acted coquettishly to the silver-haired young man next to her. Her voice was decadent and intoxicating. The silver-haired man spread his hands and said helplessly, "You know, I have said it many times. But he almost dirted my new clothes this time." The woman pointed the dagger in her hand at the black armor that only protected the vital parts and private parts of her body, and pouted in dissatisfaction. The silver-haired man touched his forehead and sighed. "That's armor, Eunice. Isn't it just clothes?" The woman called Eunice carefully wiped the dust off the black armor. "These clothes are very good, very comfortable to wear. Leader, we've completed our mission this time. Should we return these clothes to them?" "Of course we have to return it. The suits we're wearing are made from the skin of the black rock dragon lizard. It's worth a lot," the silver-haired man replied casually. However, when he saw the dangerous glint in the eyes of the seductive woman beside him, he quickly changed his words. "But if you really like it, you can exchange it with the bounty this time." "That's more like it." Eunice snorted and picked up the black dagger. "Whoever dares to snatch my clothes, I'll take his life." "Leader, Wildcat, what are you guys talking about?" The burly man named Oliver seemed to have finished enjoying himself. He walked back with his giant sword. "Big monkey, stay away from me." Eunice seemed to be unable to bear the filth on the other party's body. She covered her nose and quickly jumped away. Then, she grabbed her dagger and said angrily, "I'm a wild leopard, not a wildcat. If you shout again, I'll kill you." "All right, Wildcat," said Oliver carelessly. "You." Eunice's expression changed. She waved her dagger and was about to attack. However, when she saw the bloodstains on the other party's body, she stopped in her tracks. "Remember this. I'll settle this with you later." After saying that, she swung her blonde hair. Her figure flashed in front of the gray-coat army soldiers like a ghost. Sudden stab, throat slash, back attack, a series of fatal attacks were launched. It seemed that she was venting her dissatisfaction. Her speed was so fast that the surrounding soldiers could only slash at her afterimage. Before they could retrieve their weapons, the other party's dagger had already slashed at their vitals. Soon, the group of soldiers who rushed up were completely annihilated by this enchanting figure. TSK, this wildcat's claws are very sharp. Behind them, Oliver smacked his lips and sighed. "That's why I told you not to provoke her." The silver-haired man looked at the chaotic situation around him and said casually, "Hee, I still want to touch her." Oliver licked his lips and said in a crazy tone, "This kind of opponent is more enjoyable to fight." "You're asking for trouble," the silver-haired man said disapprovingly. "If you provoke her, you won't even be able to sleep peacefully." Oliver looked at the figure that appeared and disappeared mysteriously in the crowd, and scratched his head. That's true. At this time, the silver-haired man frowned. Strange, why did the explosion stop? It means that the kid who played with the exploding crystal was killed. Oliver shook the blood off his giant saber indifferently. Captain, the 5 of us are good enough. Why did you have to add that kid? He's so weak. The silver-haired man shook his head. Strength doesn't decide everything. Sometimes, a special attack can have an unexpected effect. Think about it. If he hadn't blown up the defense, would we have been able to rescue them so smoothly? I could have split those useless soldiers apart by myself. But that would have slowed down the time, the silver-haired man said faintly. The silver-haired man said indifferently and then shook his head. I just felt that there was something wrong with that huge explosion. It seems that he really was killed. What a pity. Although the 2 of them spoke unhurriedly, the group's speed didn't decrease at all. Because of Oliver and Eunice's actions, the group's speed increased. Hey, you came to rescue us. Why didn't you break through to the south of the encampment? A few noble youths walked over from behind and questioned. They couldn't be blamed for asking this question. It was a very obvious question. Since they had rescued them, they should have broken through the encirclement in the nearest direction. But now they were heading west. Wasn't this giving up what was close at hand for what was far away? The noble youths didn't get an answer to their questions. In fact, the 2 of them didn't even pay attention to them. The silver-haired man continued to command the black-armored men to head west, while Oliver silently wiped his giant saber. How dare you! The noble youths had never been looked down upon like this. One of them pointed at the silver-haired man and said angrily, "Didn't you hear what I said?" The noble youth was a bit out of control. After all, these people had come to rescue them. But when the light of escape was at hand, this side made a stupid move. How could they not be anxious? Ha ha! Oliver suddenly cracked his lips into a soundless chuckle as he looked at the questioning young noble with great interest. At this time, the silver-haired man calmly turned his head and looked at the finger in front of him. He said indifferently, "Perhaps you don't know, but I hate it when people point at me." The noble youth looked at the silver-haired man's calm eyes. His heart suddenly trembled, and he couldn't help but retract his outstretched finger. But his long-term superior mentality made him stop and continue to point. "I'm pointing." The noble youth felt a chill in his hand. He looked on helplessly as the outstretched finger suddenly and inexplicably disappeared. Then blood spurted out. "Ah!" A belated scream suddenly sounded, drowning out the sounds of fighting in the surroundings. This was probably the most serious injury he had ever received in his life. "You should be glad." The silver-haired man bent over to pick up the severed finger and stuffed it into the noble youth's hand. "If any one of you died, there would be no reward." He patted the youth's shoulder. "Take it. With your family's connections, it should be easy to ask the Temple of Light for help. Don't cry, this can still be fixed." He was really trying his best to persuade her with kind words. After doing all this, the silver-haired man looked up and said calmly, "Do you have any other questions?" The noble youths' faces were pale, and they kept shaking their heads and retreating. "Very good." As if nothing had been done, the silver-haired man turned around and continued to command. At this time, bang! There was an explosion in the distance. Oliver looked up in surprise and saw the shape of an arrow imprinted in the air. After a few seconds, the symbol disappeared. "They need the help of Goshawk. This group of trash really disgraces our profession." The silver-haired man shook his head. "Don't underestimate the strength of the Gray Coat Army. To be able to fight against the Empire for so many years, there must be some outstanding talent." "Ha, that's a pity." Oliver grinned cruelly. "Goshawk never leaves anyone alive under his arrows." Although this sentence was absolute, the silver-haired man did not express any objection. Obviously, He was also very optimistic that Goshawk could quickly eliminate the threat over there. Let's go, the other party has completely reacted. We need to speed up now. Okay. Oliver laughed and strode to the front of the group with a huge sword in one hand. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidien. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 229. The arrow-shaped symbol was so eye-catching that Tang En naturally saw it, but he did not understand what it meant. At this time, he was hiding in the shadows behind an earth wall. However, after 3 minutes, he still did not see the group of black armor men chasing after him. He could not help but feel puzzled. Although his speed of escaping was fast enough, in order to assassinate them, he did not close the distance by much. Logically speaking, it would only take a moment for the group of black armor men to catch up. Were they not going to chase after him? Tang En walked out of the shadows and rushed to the south. His primary goal was to break in, and he did not have much time to waste on these people. There! Tang En turned around and saw that the group of black armor men did not move. They only pointed at him when they saw him coming out. However, although they had discovered him, they still did not chase after him. What's going on? Tang En frowned. He did not understand. However, since they did not chase after him, he would not kill them. After thinking for a while, Tang En stepped forward and rushed inside. Suddenly, his galloping figure stopped in an instant, defying inertia. At this moment, whoosh, with a soft sound, a black shadow quickly brushed past his eyes. Bang, it was nailed to the earth wall on his left. Tang En's figure flashed and stuck to the right wall. At this time, a drop of cold sweat fell from his forehead. The arrow nailed to the left wall was an ordinary arrow, but it almost took Tang En's life. How could it be? Tang En boasted that he was quite sensitive to killing intent. If someone aimed an arrow at him, he should be able to sense it. However, the arrow just now had reached him silently. If he had not stopped when he heard the arrow, his head would have been blown off. This was definitely an expert archer. Tang En's body shook. He subconsciously turned and slid sideways, instantly retreating a foot. Bang! 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 A green arrow pierced through the wall he was hiding in, and then it pierced through the wall on the left, leaving 2 small holes. F***ck, do you have to be so godly? You can still see me even when I'm hiding here. Normal people would need to take a breather to calm themselves down after avoiding a fatal danger. The other party obviously knew this, but even if they knew, it was still not easy to hit the target and penetrate several earth walls. Tang En retreated a few more feet. Judging from the direction of the arrow, the enemy should be diagonally above him in the south. It was impossible to see Tang En walking along the wall from there. I'd like to see how you're going to aim this time. Tang En muttered and was about to climb up the wall. Passively taking a beating was not his style. Finding a way to counterattack was the way to go. However, at this moment, bang, 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 several green arrows pierced through the earthen wall like a torrential rain of pear blossoms. After a few steps, he suddenly turned 90 degrees, went straight and changed directions again, constantly changing speed and rhythm, madly changing directions. Under the shadow of death, Tang En did not dare to take it lightly. Such a move obviously made the opponent somewhat unable to adapt. The arrows that were shot did not have any effect. Then the attack stopped. The surrounding people saw Tang En inexplicably dodging alone. This scene was obviously a little funny. However, Tang En did not dare to be careless. The arrows that were not shot were the biggest threat. Tang En now felt like he was walking on a small road at night with a poisonous snake following him from the bushes. As long as he was the slightest bit careless, he would be greeted with a fatal blow. In fact, his best choice now was to turn south and approach to kill the opponent. However, the current situation of the encampment was imminent. He had no choice but to rush inside. What should I do? What should I do, eh? Tang En looked at the black armored man who was fighting with the soldiers not far away. His eyes lit up, and then he kept moving closer. I'm the captain of the gray space, Tang En. Leave this to me. You guys step back. The attacking soldiers were stunned by this roar, and then involuntarily retreated. They had heard of Tang En's fierce reputation. Since he wanted to help, the soldiers naturally had no reason to not step aside. After another change in rhythm, Twain's figure suddenly closed in on the black armor man. In close combat, his strength was not comparable to these people. In just a few seconds, Tang En captured the two black armored men. After swiftly breaking their limbs, Tang En lifted the black armored men toward the south, one in each hand. I'd like to see how you're going to attack this time. After a few seconds, there was no movement at all. Phew! Tang En breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that the opponent still had some scruples. This made things easier. Suddenly, whoosh, the hair-raising sound of an arrow was heard again. Tang En's heart tightened. He could not help but curse. Damn it, you're attacking your own people. Do you have any humanity? At this time, the two black armored men in his hands trembled violently and shouted in fear. Goshawk, no! This was because the two of them blocked his view. Tang En only realized that the arrow was a little strange. In front of the arrowhead, there seemed to be a ball of flame surrounding it. Boom! There was an explosion and the entrance of the tunnel collapsed. Suddenly, dust filled the air and flames soared to the sky. The retreating soldiers were thrown to the ground by the rolling air wave. They stared blankly at this scene. The captain of the gray space was dead? Whoosh! A red figure jumped out of the sea of fire and rolled continuously on the ground, raising waves of dirt. It was like a long dragon that reached the bottom of the earth wall. The flames were extinguished. Who else could it be but Tang En? He pointed his middle finger to the south. F***ck you win. At this time, Tang En looked a little miserable. Not only was his face covered in soot and blood, but his black clothes were also burned to pieces. This was because he saw that the situation was not good and dodged first. Otherwise, he would have been reduced to ashes like the two black armored men. He could not hide, nor could he escape. Taking hostages was not something that the opponent would accept. Tang En was really disheartened. Did he really have to kill his way over? At this time, the sky suddenly brightened. A golden sword light, like a mountain, descended from the sky and slashed toward the most chaotic place in the south of the base. Zhuo Fan. Through the flames, Tang En was shocked to see that the person standing silently behind Luo Sha was the simple man holding a sword. Void-level warrior? Warriors who cultivated Do Qi could only stand in the air when they reached the void level. Tang En knew that Zhuo Fan's strength was not low, but the fact that he was a void-level warrior still shocked him. Roar! A loud roar came from the distance. Then, a giant blue sword light soared into the sky and met the golden sword light. Boom! 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 Do Qi overflowed and the sky changed color. Although there was such a distance between them, Tang En still felt like thunder in his ears. There was a roar in his head. The ordinary soldiers were even worse. Their legs went soft and they fell to the ground. Was this the power of a void-level warrior? Tang En stared at the sky. At this time, the blue sword light had been crushed in the collision. The golden sword light dimmed a little, but it still stubbornly fell. Boom! Another rumbling sound was heard, and Tang En seemed to see circular ripples that were constantly expanding and shaking the void. Wah! Wah! Cheers came from all directions. The struggling gray-coat army soldiers raised their weapons to the sky. Their morale soared. Bang, 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 a few more explosions came from the sky. Zhuo Fan's golden sword seemed to have broken something. Tang En came back to his senses and squinted his eyes. It was the archer. Good. Let me meet you right now. With Zhuo Fan here, Tang En did not need to break through. His body flashed and he directly rushed to the south. Damn, you beat me up so badly. Now it's time to let you have a taste of my dagger. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidien. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 230. There was a saying in the other world about cultivation. Magic depended on innate talent, while battle chi depended on acquired talent. Innate talent referred to things like talent. As for acquired talent, it referred to continuous hard work. Although this statement was somewhat biased, it did explain some things. The cultivation of battle chi was more difficult than magic. Moreover, in the early stages, it was weaker. However, if a battle chi warrior could reach the void level, they would enter a new realm. At that time, the warrior would have the ability to fly and would not be inferior to a magician of the same level. In a life and death battle, they would even have an advantage. After all, warriors who could reach this realm had to fight their way through mountains of corpses and seas of blood. However, it was not easy to reach the void level. Because of talent, there were tens of thousands of people who cultivated battle chi in the other world. However, among them, there was less than 1 in 10,000 who could reach the void level. No one could imagine that among the Grey Coat army that the Bran officials called rioters and bandits, there would be a warrior who could stand out of thin air. Zhuofan's sword landed in front of the intruders. Most of the black armor men were sent flying, but it did not hurt the dozen or so noble youths behind them. His control of power was so precise that it made people gasp in amazement. After breaking a few arrows that were shot at him, Zhuofan descended from the sky. At this moment, bang! A tall and sturdy blue figure rushed out from the huge depression formed by the golden sword slash. Then, a burst of arrogant laughter rang through the sky. Haha, so you haven't reached the void level yet. This person was Oliver, who was holding a giant battle sword. His hair was disheveled and blood flowed from his mouth and eyes. However, he did not care at all. His eyes were blood red as he looked at Zhuofan. This sentence was not without reason. If Zhuofan was a void-level warrior, then that sword slash should have killed him. Zhuofan did not refute, nor did he admit it. He only calmly raised the 3-foot-long golden sword. The silver-haired man and the others trembled and immediately prepared themselves. To be able to stand out of thin air, even if he had not reached the void level, he was at least half a step in. It would not be difficult to defeat or even kill them. Zhuofan's sword moved. The golden light on it flowed like water. Then, in a flash, it silently pierced towards Oliver's chest. Roar! Oliver's aura expanded like that of a lion's, and his enormous warblade exploded with blue light, sending a heavy chop forward. If one were to look at the fighting auras of the two sides, Oliver was undoubtedly stronger. His blue aura surged like a raging flood. But unfortunately, the result was not so. Before the sword and saber were solid, the dou chi on them tangled together and then collapsed. Boom! Ah! With an unwilling roar, Ollie was sent flying with his sword. His blue body smashed through a dozen earth walls like a cannonball. Zhuofan was about to take a step forward to give chase when he suddenly frowned and his body swayed to the side. At this time, the space where he was just a moment ago rippled like water, and a black dagger stabbed out silently. Then, an enchanting figure appeared. He, handsome, don't be in such a hurry to leave. Eunice revealed a sweet smile as a soft and charming voice rang out. Zhuofan's expression didn't change. He swung his golden radiance sword to the left. Ding! Ouch! With a coquettish cry, Eunice's figure reappeared. Like the wind, she retreated more than 30 meters before dissolving the tyrannical power of the golden radiance sword. At this time, Eunice's smiling figure in front of Zhuofan faintly dissipated. Roar! A roar like that of a giant beast deep in the mountains rang out. An earth wall was lifted by some kind of power and directly smashed towards Zhuofan. Chi! The golden radiance sword appeared again, sweeping across several meters and hitting the center of the earth wall. Boom! The earth was smashed into pieces by the tyrannical radiance sword. Ha ha! Chop! A blue giant suddenly rushed out from the fog-like dust, followed by an enormous blue radiance sword that was like a towering ancient tree. This was Oliver, but at this time, he didn't look like a normal human being. His body had almost doubled in size, and the black armor on his body looked like a toy. He stepped forward, and the earth shook. Earth-level warrior. Zwafan muttered something that only he could hear. That's right, Oliver's situation clearly showed that he had borrowed external power, and this was the symbol of an Earth-level warrior. Ha, big monkey, you're serious? Eunice laughed. Looks like I have to be serious too. Saying this, a faint black fog suddenly appeared out of thin air, enveloping her graceful figure. Then, this black fog floated towards Zwafan, who was fiercely fighting. Gold, black, and blue, the three colors of light bloomed in the field. Fighting energy swept across the surrounding area, and in an instant, all the earth walls were directly flattened, forming a battle circle that mortals couldn't enter. Phew, this mission is a big loss. The silver-haired man on the periphery sighed, and then gathered the black-armored men again. He helped the dazed noble youths to the side. Chi. After a few steps, a golden radiance sword cleaved towards them. Needless to say, this was Zwafan's attack. Despite being surrounded by two Earth-grade martial artists, he was still able to control the entire situation with ease. He immediately launched an attack to cut off these people's escape route. The silver-haired man helplessly shook his head, turned around, opened his hands, and pushed. Hiss, 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 as if gathering countless wind whistles, the golden radiance sword suddenly stopped a meter away from the silver-haired man's palms, as if it was blocked by something. As the golden radiance sword flowed, bits of silver light flickered and gathered, finally forming a silver cocoon. If someone was more attentive and sharper, they would discover that the silver cocoon was actually made up of transparent threads. Bang! This stalemate didn't last for more than a few seconds before the silver cocoon shattered. The silver-haired man staggered back, sliding to the side to dodge the golden radiance sword. However, the black-armored men behind him weren't as strong. About 5 or 6 of them didn't even have time to struggle before they were sent flying. Their black armor was dented, and blood sprayed into the air. It was obvious that they were dead. This was the result of the silver-haired man blocking the attack first. Otherwise, the black-armored men wouldn't have been able to escape. The silver-haired man pointed at the noble youths and said to the remaining black-armored men, "I'll block it. You guys take these people to the magic array." Saying this, he stepped into the battle circle and headed towards the center of the fighting energy. The moment the Do-Chi came close to him, it was blocked by a flash of silver light. When he officially joined the encirclement, the battle circle became even more intense. All kinds of fighting energy mixed together, dazzling people from afar. However, it was only suitable for watching from afar. If a normal person came close, any one of the scattered fighting energy would be enough to kill them. Zwafan didn't panic at all under the coordinated attacks of these three people. Attack, defense, attack, attack. The golden radiance sword was like a pillar that blocked all kinds of attack. At other times, it was like a king looking down on the world, suppressing all kinds of fighting energy. This was the power of a Void Realm warrior. Although he only stepped into the Void Realm, he was able to beat up 3 Earth Realm warriors who had been through hundreds of battles. Combine! Zwafan spat out a clear word for the first time. The golden radiance sword that had been flowing like water suddenly shone brightly. It was as if a small sun had appeared on the golden radiance sword that was raised high. Dazzle! Another clear word. The small suns that were converging on each other exploded, releasing countless beams of dazzling golden light. Bang, bang, bang! Boom, boom, boom! Amidst the continuous sounds of collision, the silver, black, and blue fighting energy was swept away. As if clearing the battlefield, The golden radiance sword occupied the entire battle circle. Piu, under such a tyrannical attack, the silver-haired man, Oliver, and Eunice all spat out blood and flew back. Eunice was the most miserable. She was a speed-type person, so her defense was naturally weaker. The black fog around her was almost completely swept away by the golden radiance sword, revealing her pale face. Xuefan's attack was effective, but he didn't follow up with another attack. Instead, he flashed towards the group of black-armored people. Obviously, he knew that this was the key point. Oliver and I will go. Eunice, summon the goshawk to help. The silver-haired man quickly ordered. Then, he and Oliver leapt forward. Long-range attacks were the best choice to stop the enemy. The silver-haired man believed that as long as they could hold on tightly, and with the goshawk's constant interference, they would definitely be able to let the group of noble youths reach the captive camp. There was a magic teleportation array that would send them here. Whoosh bang! The arrow-shaped symbol appeared in the air once again. However, after the three of them had tangled with the goshawk for a while, an arrow finally arrived. In the end, it was easily shattered by Xuefan. After that, no more arrows came to help. The silver-haired man blocked a golden radiance sword and retreated a few steps. He looked towards the south in surprise. The goshawk was entangled? To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidien. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 231. If you asked the Tang En of the past what his favorite character was in an assassin movie, he would say that it was the one with the sniper rifle. He believed that many people would say the same thing. What was the reason? Who knew? Maybe it was the thrill of shooting someone from afar, or maybe it was because the sniper rifle looked more domineering, or maybe it was because he liked the feeling of quietly putting the crosshair on the target's head, curling his lips and smiling, and then pulling the trigger. There were no sniper rifles in this world. This was certain. Of course, there were still long-range weapons. For example, the most classic bow and arrow. Compared to the former, it was much worse in terms of distance, accuracy, and so on. It was also not easy to master it. There was no other way. After all, its composition was too simple. Bow and arrow. Dagger. Tang En knew how to use both weapons. Of course, he was more inclined towards the dagger, as he spent more time practicing on it. This choice was not wrong. Although the dagger could shorten the distance and make the battle more dangerous. However, it was able to control the battle very well. After all, you couldn't use a bow and arrow to hold someone hostage from hundreds of meters away. That was something that could only be done with a sniper rifle. Moreover, shooting with a bow and arrow required time. The farther the distance, the more uncertain the outcome. This was the so-called, a difference of a millimeter could lead to a loss of 1,000 miles. But now Tang En, who was temporarily hiding in the corner, looked at the bow and arrow nailed to his feet. He couldn't help but sigh. This is clearly AF** King Sniper Rifle. Just now, he took advantage of Xuefan's domineering appearance to suddenly turn south. The opponent named Goshawk instantly understood his intention and immediately turned his bow and arrow around, using sharp attacks to firmly suppress him in the encampment. The bow and arrow was a long-range weapon. No archer would allow the enemy to get close. Tang En moved forward in a very difficult manner. He pounced, dodged, rolled, moved. He used almost all the ways he could move, and repeatedly brushed past the whistling arrows. His current position was not far from the edge of the encampment, but there were two large sections of spacious space in front of him. If it were any other time, he would have been able to swagger over. But now, it was like a natural moat that could not be crossed. Looking around, Tang En's eyes lit up. He carefully dragged a dead gray coat army soldier over, took off his plate armor, and walked to the entrance of the passage with his back bent. Whoosh! The plate armor was tossed backward. his figure was already sprinting forward at lightning speed. Bang! The plate armor that had just flown out of the wall was pinned to the back by an arrow with a barb. Huff, huff, Tang En once again hid behind a bunker. Although it was only a short distance, he was already gasping for breath and sweat could be seen on his forehead. The thick shadow of death shrouded his heart. It was as if there was a grim reaper holding a sickle by his side, constantly urging him to die. Die quickly, die quickly. Why aren't you dead yet? Shaking his head, Tang En grabbed another corpse and took off the plate armor. But this time, he was not in a hurry to rush out. Instead, he made a small device and tied the plate armor to the top of the wall using torn cloth from the tent. Then, he dragged the other end of the long rope to the side of the passage. Pulling and loosening, half of the plate armor popped out and immediately dived back down. There was no movement. Pulling and loosening again, there was still no reaction. Tsk, tsk. Tang En smacked his lips twice and was about to pull again. Whoosh, 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 bang, bang, bang. 3 arrows that came at high speed penetrated the earth wall below the plate armor, and in an instant 3 more arrows were shot in the surroundings. Ha ha! With a long laugh, Tang En flashed out again. He crossed a large distance and arrived at the bottom of the passage at the edge of the encampment. Sure enough, no matter how cunning a fox, yes, no matter how shrewd a hunter is, he can't beat a good fox. The goshawk's attack stopped. This was expected. After all, it was not an earth wall, but earth. No matter how heavy the arrow was, it could not penetrate it. After a moment of pride, Tang En's expression became serious again. He took out his dagger and tidied up his equipment. Next was the time for a life-and-death battle. The goshawk was about 1,000 meters away. In front of them was a vast and empty valley, without any obstructions or obstructions. In fact, if it was a normal archer, he would have already retreated. However, Tang En believed that the goshawk would not. From the moment he dodged the first arrow, the battle between the two had begun. I'll bet. If I don't pass, I'll die. If I pass, I'll kill you. After taking a few steps to the left, Tang En instantly jumped to the ground. Without waiting to move forward, he first changed directions like a ghost. Whoosh, the arrow penetrated the illusion. Roar. Come on. A loud roar was heard and spread far and wide. Haste, activate. Phantom, activate. Heart of Still Water, activate. In an instant, he activated 3 skills that he could use. Tang En's body changed 1,000 times. The ground was densely covered with moving afterimages of different sizes. Forward, forward, forward. From the moment he stepped on the ground, there was no turning back. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The hair-raising whistling sound of arrows was like a violent wind that did not stop for a moment. Tang En had never known that a person could shoot an arrow so quickly and so accurately. This was not a sniper rifle. This was a F*King sniper machine gun. Afterimages appeared one after another, but they were all shot through. Tang En stared at the trajectory of the whistling arrows and kept dodging them. Although jumping to the ground exposed him to the goshawk's vision, it was not without benefits. At least there was now more space for him to dodge. 1,000 meters. Under normal circumstances, Tang En could pass through in less than 10 seconds if he was in his full state. However, he only walked less than 100 meters despite using all his tricks. Fear? Panic? Suffering? No, after activating Heart of Still Water, Tang En's mind was filled with nothing but calculating the speed and trajectory of the arrows. At that moment, the whistling sound of the arrows suddenly stopped. Tang En's expression changed, then he twisted his body even more crazily. Was the goshawk tired? Was he running away? Impossible. Due to the close distance and the goshawk's undisguised movements, Tang En could clearly sense the cold, murderous intent in front of him. Therefore, this pause could only mean that the goshawk was preparing for a big move. The unknown was the most terrifying thing. The feeling of knowing that the opponent was preparing for an attack, while he could only take it head-on, was not good. Tang En licked his lips as he ran. Come on, come on. Whoosh, whoosh, hiss, hiss, the long-awaited attack finally arrived. Before the arrows arrived, Tang En frowned. This whistling sound doesn't sound right. More than 10 arrows appeared in his sight, one after another. Some were fast, some were slow, some were straight, some were curved? Tang En's expression changed drastically. He no longer had the time to consider how the goshawk had shot the arrows with such beautiful arcs. His mind was constantly circling and calculating the trajectories of the dozens of arrows, as well as finding the blind spots. 3.5 steps to the left? No. That curved arrow would penetrate that place. 2 steps to the right? No, that's a trap. The last slow arrow would pass by. Found it. Tang En's eyes lit up. He leaned forward and jumped to the side. Suddenly, ding, 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 more than 10 crisp sounds like wind chimes rang out. It was very pleasant to the ears. However, to Tang En, this pleasant sound was clearly a sonata welcoming the arrival of the Grim Reaper. More than 10 meters in front of him, the trajectory of the arrows changed abruptly due to the sudden insertion of a curved arrow. It's too late. Tang En did not even have the time to panic. His figure was still rushing to the predetermined location, but there was an additional dagger in front of him. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Ding. Damn it. Looking at the arrows that were deflected by the dagger, Tang En was not happy at all because he knew what would happen next. Whoosh. As expected, a cone-shaped arrow hit the left side of his chest, but Tang En's body had stopped moving because of the arrow that had been sent flying. The old force was gone, and the new force was not born. Crack. Puff. Of. With a muffled groan, blood bloomed. The cold conical arrow pierced through his chest. Thud, thud, thud. His body continued to move forward dozens of meters due to inertia. Then, his footsteps came to a halt, and his body staggered forward a few steps. Perhaps it was because a hero cherished another hero, or perhaps it was for some other reason. The goshawk did not shoot another arrow. Yes, there's no need for that. It's already pierced through my heart. I'm dead for sure. Tang En's figure was like a willow branch in the strong wind. He was about to fall to the ground, but he continued to move forward a few steps unyieldingly. The arrow still didn't come. That's right. His unwillingness to admit defeat is worthy of respect even if he's an opponent. Tang En moved forward a few more meters. Well, this person's vitality is really tenacious. He moved forward a few more meters. He moved forward a few more meters. Whoosh. Just when Tang En was about to fall to the ground for 100 meters, the goshawk could not take it anymore and shot an arrow at his head. He stepped to the side, shook his head, and whoosh. Tang En, who was in a near-death state, suddenly sprinted forward. Ha ha! You're too naive to want to kill me so much. His roar was loud and full of energy. How is this the sound of a dying person? It turned out that the arrow had pierced through his chest, but it had not pierced his heart. Of course, it was not because of the goshawk's archery skills, but because Tang En had used the bone shrinkage skill in that instant. The arrow that was originally aimed at his heart was 1 inch higher. It was only 1 inch, but it was the distance between life and death. After running and deceiving, Tang En was now about 600 meters away from the goshawk. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh from the torrential rain of arrows, it was obvious that the goshawk was angry. This was normal. He originally thought that Tang En was an opponent worthy of respect, so he did not continue to attack the dead. Unexpectedly, he was wrong. His opponent turned out to be a shameless liar. Of course, Tang En was not aware of this. Shameless? Which thief or assassin is not shameless? Angry? Haha, good, I want you to be angry. After experiencing a life-and-death situation, Tang En did not dare to be careless anymore. He would rather take 10 steps around the target than force himself to take a step forward. In such a vast wilderness, It was difficult for his running figure to be surrounded by arrows again. After a while, Tang En's heart skipped a beat. This arrow doesn't seem to be so accurate? Tang En paused his steps and stopped instantly. Whoosh, an arrow shot past 3 inches away from him. As expected, it's a few hundred meters away, and there's only such a small error. But who's the other party? It's the goshawk who can still send an arrow to the predicted location from a few thousand meters away. Abnormal, this is too abnormal. But what's the reason for this? The goshawk's own factor can be ruled out, so it must be an external factor. But here, the wilderness is empty, and the dark stars are hanging low. Tang En suddenly turned his head. Needless to say, there was only darkness behind him. I see. Ha ha! Tang En could not help but want to laugh out loud. He finally knew why the goshawk had lost its standard. The reason was actually very simple. It was the light. Previously, whether Tang En was in the encampment or on the ground, there were flames beside and behind him. The goshawk was hidden in the darkness, so naturally it could see it clearly. However, now that Tang En was running around, he had already deviated from the flames behind him. The goshawk was observing from the dark, and could no longer see Tang En's ghostly figure clearly. Damn it, it's finally my turn. Tang En took out his dagger and no longer hesitated. He rushed in an arc toward the arrow. Suddenly, boom! There was an explosion more than 10 meters away from him, and flames soared into the sky. This should be the arrow that blew up Tang En previously. Tsk, you're quite smart. Tang En smacked his lips twice and quickly ran toward the shadows outside the flames. I'd like to see how many more of these arrows you can shoot. This kind of special tool was like the explosive crystal. Most of them were military supplies. Of course, they could also be sold in the black market, but they must be expensive. Therefore, Tang En did not believe that the goshawk had many of these things in his hands. Boom! Tang En escaped from the flames in a sorry state. Boom! A piece of flesh was torn off the outside of his left arm by the barbed arrow. Boom! A long bloody groove was left on his lower abdomen. After 3 explosions, Tang En was 200 meters closer. The goshawk did not shoot any more arrows. Once again, he sprinted 50 meters forward. In the blurry twilight, Tang En saw a lookout tower piled up with dozens of tree trunks. When he looked up, he saw a slender black figure standing on the platform. His long robes fluttered in the cold night wind, making him look like a goshawk gliding with its wings spread. At that moment, they were less than 300 meters apart. Although he could not see the goshawk's eyes, Tang En could feel that the goshawk was watching him. Goshawk! A slightly sharp voice was heard against the night wind. Tang En! After quickly looking around, Tang En answered casually. Very well, you're the only prey that escaped from my arrows. I'll remember you. Tang En was startled. He quickly raised his dagger and made a throat-slitting gesture at the goshawk. Following that, he dashed toward the lookout tower at lightning speed. Tang En heard the goshawk's intention to retreat. He made the provocative gesture in hopes of provoking the goshawk to stay for a fight. Hee. The goshawk shook his head and turned around. Damn it! Tang En glared at the goshawk indignantly. Generally speaking, archers were not good at close combat. Therefore, they were not slow to get rid of their enemies. If the goshawk ran away at full speed, Tang En was not confident that he could stop him. After all, the goshawk was aware of his speed, but he stayed to ask for his name. It was obvious that he was confident in his speed. Bang! An explosion was heard in the sky far away, followed by a flash of light. The goshawk, who was about to jump down, paused and turned to see an arrow-shaped symbol in midair. He furrowed his eyebrows and looked at Tang En, who was rushing toward him. Creak! The black bow in his hand made a sound, and the last fiery red arrow in his gorgeous quiver was knocked. He aimed at the north first, then he paused and aimed below. Whoosh! Given the close distance, the goshawk did not even need to look before he released the arrow. Boom! The arrow landed, and flames soared into the sky. Tang En's body was instantly devoured. Nevertheless, the goshawk did not look relieved. He was not very confident about the arrow just now because Tang En had dodged it before. In fact, if it was not because his teammate called for help from afar, he would have fled the scene. He initially planned to retreat and destroy the watchtower with the arrow to stop Tang En from pursuing him. The goshawk shook his head and quickly held his breath. He picked up a normal arrow on the other side, pulled the bowstring, aimed, and shot. Whoosh! The process was so smooth that he did not even take time to aim. It looked like a casual shot. Nonetheless, anyone who knew the goshawk's name would know that he never missed an arrow. Creak! Unknowingly, another arrow was knocked on the bow, and there were 3 of them. He pulled the bowstring and aimed. All of a sudden, the goshawk's right hand shook. Even a rookie archer knew that the hand holding the arrow should not shake, especially before the arrow was released. This was because it would affect the arrow's trajectory and cause it to miss its target. However, the goshawk, whose archery skills were superb, shook his hand at that moment. He instantly turned around and pointed the arrow backward. Before he could release the arrow, a blade light flashed in his eyes. Hiss! Bang! The bowstring was cut, and the blade light went for the goshawk's throat. Bam! The goshawk stomped on the wooden platform, then he leaned backward and fell from the platform, which was over 10 meters high. Die! A muffled voice was heard from above. Following that, a black figure pounced on him without any hesitation. There was no doubt that it was Tang En. However, even Josiah, who was the most familiar with him, would not be able to recognize him at the moment. First of all, he was black from head to toe. Even his white teeth could not be seen because he had inhaled too much black smoke. Secondly, he was miserable. His clothes were already in a mess from the explosion, and he was only left with a trendy pair of shorts to cover his private parts. Moreover, his exposed black skin was covered with dark red cracks as if lava was brewing in the black soil. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh! The goshawk, who fell backward, threw 3 arrows at Tang En. Although they were not shot from a bow, there was no problem with their accuracy. Between the eyebrows, throat, and heart. Ding! 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 Without blinking, Tang En swung his dagger and accurately deflected the arrows. Landing! The goshawk was only a few meters above the ground. Logically speaking, he should have adjusted his body and landed safely. However, looking at the torch-like eyes in front of him, the goshawk knew that if he dared to turn around, he would not be able to escape from a stab to his heart. Bang! Blood instantly appeared at the corner of the goshawk's mouth, but he could not care less at the moment. He slapped the ground and leaped backward. Swish! The dagger stabbed into the ground by a hair's breadth. Tang En fell to the ground as well. Without looking at his body, he pulled out his dagger and charged forward. Ding! The goshawk took out a dagger from his pocket and blocked Tang En's attack. Die! 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 Tang En activated his blood chi like a madman. Threads crisscrossed and enveloped the goshawk like a large net. The goshawk could not hold on any longer. His battle aura was not weak, but he devoted all his talents to the bow and arrow, so he was unfamiliar with daggers. He had no problem dealing with ordinary people, but against Tang En, who was an expert with daggers. Hiss! In less than 3 seconds, a red line cut close to the goshawk's neck. Then, Tang En emerged from behind him. I can't shoot arrows. You can't play with daggers. Hiss! Blood spurted. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidien. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 232. Don't underestimate any small decision, because it could bring about disastrous consequences. Retreat? Or support his teammates? Goshawk chose the latter at that moment, so he folded his wings and lay coldly on the ground. He believed that if he chose to retreat with his decisiveness and speed, he would definitely be able to escape Tang En's pursuit. Unfortunately, he didn't have the chance to make a choice all over again. Seeing Goshawk's throat slit, Tang En heaved a sigh of relief. His body went limp and he almost collapsed to the ground. There was no need to doubt Goshawk's strength. If Tang En could go back to a few minutes ago, he might not have had the courage to jump to the ground. Although he was lucky enough to kill Goshawk, Tang En had paid a heavy price. Putting aside the miserable external injuries, the key was the explosive power. Right now, Tang En felt a tightness in his chest, as if his internal organs had all shifted positions. What an unlucky year! Tang En sighed and shook his head gloomily. Ever since he came to the north, he had been involved in countless small battles and large battles. The injuries on his body had never healed. The sounds of fighting in the distant encampment could be heard. Tang En took a deep breath. Now was not the time to be sentimental. He leaned over and placed his dagger on Goshawk's neck. After a pause, he put the dagger away and carried Goshawk's corpse back to the encampment. In any case, Goshawk was a respectable person. He could be shameless in a life-and-death battle. Now that he was dead, it was better to show some respect. The situation in the encampment had changed. The soldiers on the outside had broken through the black armored men's defense. After all, they had the advantage in numbers. Even if the black armored men were made of iron, how many nails could they hit? The current chaotic battle was in the center of the south. The black armored men had gathered there and formed a thick defensive line. Among them were Zwafan and the others, who were fighting fiercely. Based on the current situation, the black armored men would collapse sooner or later. Of course, this was also part of the other party's plan. Their main goal was to save the group of noble youths. In fact, if not for the sudden appearance of the terrifying Zwafan, they would have succeeded. "Captain, we can't do this deal anymore. Let's retreat." At the entrance of the tunnel, a black-armored man smashed a saber that was coming at him. He stared ahead and muttered to himself. Regimental commander, if one were to look at this word in a big way, it would be the commander of a regiment in an army that commanded over 1,000 soldiers in battle. Of course, the members of some small teams also called their leaders that way. Previously, Eunice had also addressed the silver-haired man as captain. From this, it could be seen that although these people were wearing the same uniform, they did not seem to be in the same group. The black-armored man with the face of a middle-aged man swung his sword and sent a soldier flying. He took a deep breath and said, "There's still no signal to retreat. Hold on a little longer." "What are you still holding on for?" The black-armored man from before was full of anger, spitting out resentment. "Several of our brothers have died. Even a void stage cultivator has come out. When we go back this time, even if I don't want any reward, I will find the employer and chop him to pieces." "Nonsense. Take someone's money and work for them. That's the rule in our line of work." The middle-aged man in black armor scolded, and then took the time to look behind him. "Now, I just hope that Dusk can take care of that void stage cultivator." "I don't think so. Although Dusk is famous in the circle, if they could take care of their opponent, they wouldn't have dragged it out until now." Another black-armored man beside him interrupted, and then waved the sword in his hand. "I'm the leader of the Flame Hunter group. Brother, which group are you from? Let's work together?" "Berserker Hunter group." The middle-aged man in black armor casually replied, and then nodded. "Okay, then I'll leave my side to you. Is there anyone else in your group?" As he spoke, he took a step to the right. The black-armored man waved his sword and took the opportunity to attack. This change of formation was extremely short, and the Grey Coat Army's soldiers were limited in strength and did not take advantage of this opportunity. "TSK, don't mention it." The black-armored man who came later shook his head. "I'm now a single leader." The middle-aged man in black armor was stunned and laughed bitterly. No wonder he found someone to partner with. It turned out that his own people were all dead. However, this was not a big deal. After all, this person's combat skills were not bad. If he joined them, the pressure would lessen. While he was thinking, the middle-aged man in black armor suddenly felt the area in front of him empty. The tide-like soldiers had actually retreated. However, they did not retreat too far. Both sides faced each other with a few meters between them. What's going on? The black-armored men looked at each other in dismay. They were confused by the soldiers' actions. Even if they were retreating, they should be the ones retreating. Whoosh! The soldiers suddenly retreated to the sides and opened up a path. Then, a figure slowly walked out from behind. Everyone, be careful. Someone's coming. This was the first thought that appeared in the middle-aged man's mind. He could not help but tighten his grip on the sword hilt in his hand. This was normal. Seeing that they could not take down the enemy after so long, it was reasonable for the enemy's commander to send an expert to help. In fact, even without his reminder, the surrounding black-armored men were already on high alert. If it was said that they did not think highly of the Grey Coat Army before, then ever since Swafan had appeared, they were now on high alert. Through the firelight, the black-armored men gradually saw the figure clearly. Tsk, it was indeed an expert. Not to mention other things, just from this tall and majestic, it was a bit bloated, one could see that he was not ordinary. A person of this size walked with an imposing manner. Every heavy footstep seemed to step on the hearts of the black-armored men. After the other party took a few more steps, the black-armored men were shocked to discover that the figure was not tall and sturdy. It was because there were two people stacked on top of each other. One was walking while the other was being carried on his back. What kind of joke was this? Did you think that carrying someone on your back would double your combat strength? Tuan. Captain, something is wrong. At this moment, the expression of a black-armored man holding a heavy sword suddenly changed. He pointed forward with a trembling finger. Look at the person on his back. What? The middle-aged black-armored man frowned and narrowed his eyes. He looked at the person on his back with his head drooping to the side. Black armor, one of our people? What was the meaning of this? Using a dead person to provoke us. Wait, why did this person look so familiar? Right at this moment, patter. Perhaps because the position of the person on his back was wrong, the dead black-armored man's right hand suddenly drooped down. Even though he was already dead, his hand was still tightly gripping a pitch-black longbow. The bowstring was already broken, and the bow was filled with engraved feathers. It looked like a pair of stretched wings. Eagle feather bow. The middle-aged black-armored man cried out involuntarily. Then, he immediately shifted his gaze back to the black-armored man's face. He swallowed his saliva and spat out two words with difficulty, Goshawk. They naturally knew what the eagle feather bow was. They also knew who Goshawk was. The famous Dusk was actually a hunter group just like them. The only difference was that the other party's strength and level were much higher than theirs. If not for the fact that this mission was too difficult, they would not have had the chance to work together with Dusk. The reason why Dusk was so famous was because of the 5 powerful members in it. Goshawk was one of them. He could be said to be a legend in this field. But now, he was being casually carried here like a dead dog. Some of the black-armored men could not help but rub their eyes. They really did not dare to believe what they were seeing. Unfortunately, the eagle feather bow was still drooped down, and Goshawk was still drooping down. Retreat! 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 Hoarse roars rang out continuously. The middle-aged black-armored man's mind went blank. What Dusk Hunter group? What huge bounty? Get lost. This mission was not something a human could do. I want to live. In just an instant, those ferocious black-armored men disappeared without a trace. Huff, huff. Tang En, who had carried Goshawk's corpse back with great difficulty, was constantly panting. Then, he waved his hand and threw the corpse on the ground. Damn, I'm so tired. Tang En was already regretting it. Why was he pretending? If he had known, he would have brought back a head. He waved his hand, and a soldier with a blank expression walked over. I'm the captain of the gray space. Huff Tang En. Hello, sir. The soldier quivered and straightened his body as he saluted. Tang En waved his hand and waited for his breathing to stabilize. Brother, can I ask you for a favor? Of course, please give the order, sir. Okay, thank you. Tang En patted the soldier's shoulder, then pointed to the corpse on the ground and said, Help me carry him, parade him on the street. After a while, the soldier carried Goshawk's corpse on his back and walked in front dizzily. Tang En walked behind with the help of the other soldiers. Don't panic, walk slowly. Brother, if you're really nervous, you can stare at the ground. To be honest, carrying a corpse was not a good thing. It was not because of fear. The soldiers of the Gray Coat Army had naturally seen this before. But no matter how unscrupulous it was, the feeling of being so close to a cold dead person was naturally not good. But now, the soldier did not feel that way at all. In fact, gradually, a huge sense of glory grew from the bottom of his heart. The people who gave him this feeling were the pale and frightened black armor men in front of him. Goshawk's corpse was a huge deterrent. Now, as long as the soldier walked in front of them, the black armor men would collapse one after another, then turn around and run away without hesitation. Without batting an eyelid, a strong enemy had been reduced to ashes. The soldier was now not panicking like before. He raised his head and puffed out his chest with a calm expression, just like a peerless expert. Humph, you're all ants. Why aren't you scramming? Look, I'm an expert, how can you tell? It had to be said that given a suitable stage, anyone would be a successful actor. This great expert led more and more soldiers. First, he walked through the black armor men's defense line one by one, then he began to lead them to the center. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Chidien. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 233. South of the encampment, the captive camp. When there was war, there would be casualties and captives. The Gray Coat Army had been fighting with the legions for quite some time, especially in the recent battle at the tunnel. The Gray Coat Army had suffered heavy losses, but the legions had also left behind many injured and captive soldiers. Both sides had already exchanged captives once, but the Gray Coat Army had far fewer captives than the other side. Naturally, these extra captives could not be killed. They would be exchanged for items of equivalent value according to their rank. In the end, the most important thing in war was the outcome of victory and the rewards that would be obtained, not the military success. For ordinary people, it was naturally a good thing to be able to live. However, for warriors on the battlefield, they would rather die than bear the title of captive. Therefore, when there was a chance to escape, even if it was a slim chance of survival, many people would be willing to take the risk. Just as the silver-haired man and the others were doing their best to hold back Swafan, the group of black-armored men who were protecting the noble youth paid a heavy price and finally charged into the captive camp. Then, the guards of the captive camp were defeated and the gate was wide open. Almost all the captives who could move ran out and fought with the Gray Coat Army barehanded. Without a doubt, this brought a lot of trouble to the Gray Coat Army. After the group of black-armored men opened the captive camp, they did not stop and rushed to a tent at the side. At this moment, an anxious shout was heard. Stop them, there is a magic teleportation formation there. Teleportation formation? Everyone's hands paused as they turned to look towards the east. Leader Losha, Old General Omen, Minister Bosco, almost all the higher-ups of the Gray Coat Army were here. The shout just now came from Josiah, who was beside Losha. Josiah, who had sensed magical waves a few times, was finally sure that there was a teleportation formation inside. This also explained why the black armored men suddenly appeared in the encampment. At this moment, Losha's expression was solemn. He waved his hand and pointed to the tent. "Everyone, listen to my orders. Destroy that place at all costs." A magic formation was an intricate and mysterious thing. It was not easy to build one. At the very least, they needed a great magician who was proficient in formations. Everyone, including Rosa, could not figure out when the magic circle was built right under their noses. However, it was obviously not the time to think about that. Just as most delicate objects were fragile, magic arrays were also fragile objects. Even if any of the lines were to be destroyed, it would be useless. All the Grey Coat Army soldiers heard Losha's order and immediately rushed to the tent. At this time, old General Omeng also sent in a group of high-ranking officers behind him to form an assault team. Most of these people had fighting chi, so they could be considered as fresh troops. Suddenly, dozens of black-armored men emerged from the tent that was supposed to be a house. They quickly formed a circle and formed a defensive line. The battle reached its climax in an instant. The Grey Coat Army soldiers fought against the black armor men surrounding the noble youth while attacking the tent with all their might. Everyone understood that these noble youths could not leave. Otherwise, they would continue to be attacked by the Legion soldiers outside until they were completely wiped out. As for the black-armored men, they had to save people. If the teleportation formation was destroyed, even they would be trapped here. The Grey Coat Army had tens of thousands of people. If they were trapped here, they would either be captured or lose their lives. There was no other way out. It was either you die or I die. Both sides were in a killing frenzy. Suddenly, a golden sword radiance was emitted from the fighting chi circle and struck the tent. It was Zwafan. He was actually able to free himself to attack while being surrounded by 3 Earth-rank warriors. This sword radiance was extremely domineering. A few of the black-armored men tried to block it but were immediately crushed into pieces. "Good! Break!" The Grey Coat Army soldiers cheered. They could almost see the magic formation crumbling under the sword radiance. Eunice. With a long roar, the tent rippled and a graceful figure walked out. It was Eunice, who had the speed of a ghost. Pooh! Eunice spat out a mouthful of blood as soon as she came out. Clearly, this speed that was close to teleportation caused her to pay a price. Without wiping the blood from her mouth, Eunice let out a shrill cry and raised her daggers in the shape of a cross. "Netherworld dark mist, come out!" Hiss hiss hiss. Wisps of black smoke suddenly appeared out of thin air and quickly formed a thick layer of clouds, like a shield. Boom! Fighting chi overflowed and the air shook. The surrounding black-armored men and Grey Coat Army soldiers involuntarily went limp and fell to the ground. The illusory smoke seemed to have substance and blocked the golden sword radiance's attack. However, Eunice, whose arms were trembling, had clearly reached her limit. Her strength was not in defense. This kind of attack really made things difficult for her. But there was no other way. In that situation, only she could have rushed over quickly. "Ah! My clothes!" With another shrill cry and some inexplicable words, there was also the sound of bones breaking. Eunice fell like a cannonball and smashed into the tent. She could not hold on any longer, but this block was not useless. The netherworld dark mist finally moved the golden sword radiance a little. Boom! The sword radiance brushed past the tent and chopped down, causing waves of air to roll. Some of the black-armored men nearby could be considered to have suffered. They could not resist in time and were instantly sent flying by the fighting chi. At the same time, the tent was also destroyed by the fighting chi and turned into rags. At this time, a light purple round cover appeared in everyone's line of sight. Ripples appeared on it because of the fighting chi. Below the round cover was a sparkling pentagram. In the middle, there was a very mysterious pattern that even a layman would find mysterious. These crisscrossing lines were like transistors. Inside, there was a bright purple moving light. From afar, it looked like a liquid was constantly flowing inside. This array was the magic teleportation array. As for the light purple round cover outside, it was not a large magic shield. Its defensive power was ordinary. Its purpose was to protect the person teleporting and to prevent the array from being destroyed by wild beasts. Kill! The soldiers quickly recovered from the novelty of seeing the magic array for the first time. They waved their swords and charged forward even more ferociously. At this time, in the distance, boom, 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 continuous explosions sounded, and the fighting chi continued to bloom and shatter. Bang bang! Two figures rolled out of the fighting chi in a sorry state. It was the silver-haired man and Oliver. At this time, the two of them looked really miserable. Their bodies were full of their own bloodstains. Originally, the three of them were having a hard time besieging Zwafan. Now that Eunice had left, their fighting energy was quickly defeated. "Eunice!" Ollie roared. "What are you shouting for?" A figure flashed from the side. It was Eunice, whose beautiful face was gloomy. Her left arm was hanging limply by her side. It was obviously broken. However, when she came out, her face was full of anger as she pointed at her broken black armor and shouted at Zwafan, "Damn it, so what if you are strong? Do you know you ruined my beautiful clothes?" Zwafan, who had an indifferent expression, froze for a moment. His face actually showed some embarrassment for the first time. His mouth moved as if he wanted to apologize, but in the end, he did not say anything. Oliver, who was next to him, opened his mouth. His face was full of disbelief. The silver-haired man also covered his forehead. He looked like he could not bear to look. "Damn it, still not apologizing? Do you think you can do whatever you want just because you are handsome? Did you not learn manners?" The more Eunice spoke, the more agitated she became. In the end, if the silver-haired man had not held her back, she would have rushed forward to argue. The scene also fell into a strange silence because of her sudden outburst. Losha, who was watching from afar, had a rather interesting expression. The corner of his mouth twitched a few times. He muttered in a low voice, "Zwafan, you are a solid piece of wood." Hua! The awkward situation was instantly broken by a commotion. A group of black armored men ran over with panicked expressions. At good timing, the silver-haired man was delighted. He was about to call for help from the people outside, but unexpectedly it was him who came. They were waiting for orders. "Retreat, retreat!" The leader of the black armored men kept shouting. "Damn it, who said we should retreat?" The silver-haired man roared with an ugly expression. Because of his strength, he was the highest leader of this operation. "Leader Yema, Goshawk is dead." What? Goshawk is dead? The silver-haired man called Yema, Oliver, and Eunice all cried out in shock. From the previous situation, the three of them knew that Goshawk might have been entangled. However, they never thought that Goshawk would actually be dead. "Yes, Sir Goshawk has died in battle. The corpse is behind." The black armored man pointed behind. At this moment, a series of heavy footsteps sounded. Then, a black mass of soldiers pressed forward. The leader of the group carried the corpse of the black armored man on his back. His expression was calm. Goshawk. Yema and the others were the most familiar with Goshawk. They immediately recognized that the corpse was their teammate, Goshawk. "Ah! I want you dead." Oliver immediately went berserk. He took large strides and was about to rush over. You're all fleeting clouds. Why aren't you retreating?" The soldier at the front was obviously in character. Facing the aggressive Oliver, he only gave him a disdainful glance. Slap! The furious Oliver was pulled back by Yema's shoulder. "Leader!" Yema shook his head gently and looked at Eunice. The latter nodded. Whoosh! Her figure instantly disappeared. "Strange, why aren't these people retreating?" The soldier looked at the black armored men and was puzzled. "Do I have to fight?" Hiss! Suddenly, a black mist rose and a pitch-black dagger slashed at the soldier's throat. It was Eunice who was rushing over. She didn't dare to be careless and used the dark nether mist the moment she attacked. The soldier looked at the dagger in front of him, and his mind went blank. What was going on? Clang! A blood-red dagger poked out from behind the soldier's shoulder and clashed with the pitch-black dagger. Bang! The soldier's figure was pulled back and he fell to the back. Clang! 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 The sound of rain hitting a banana leaf was dense. Two figures, almost invisible to the naked eye, were entangled in the black mist. Attack, defense, retreat, whoosh! Whoosh! In a second, the two figures separated. So it's you. Eunice, who was holding Goshawk's body, said word by word with a dangerous glint in her eyes. This sentence sounded very sudden and inexplicable. Perhaps this was a woman's intuition. Eunice was sure that the charcoal in front of her was Goshawk's murderer at a glance. As for the charcoal, it was, of course, Tang En. At this moment, he was silent and his eyes were fixed on Eunice's dagger. Although it was only a brief exchange, he was very sure that this was a ruthless character who was not weaker than Goshawk. Pay for Goshawk's life. Eunice's eyes flashed and she waved the dagger. Eunice! Yama suddenly shouted from afar. Let's go. We've lost this time. After saying that, she simply turned and ran towards the teleportation portal. Oliver roared, unwilling to give up, and ran away. Oh, I'll remember you. Eunice stared at Tang En and suddenly smiled charmingly. If it were not for the special circumstances, it was very likely that people would think that this was the words of a lover who was reluctant to part. Of course, Tang En did not think so. He could clearly feel the cold, murderous intent under the other party's bright smile. He touched his nose. Goshawk said the same thing before. Eunice narrowed her crescent-shaped eyes and smiled even more. I can now confirm that I'll remember you for the rest of my life. Another one who's going to follow me for the rest of my life. Tang En spread his hands and said helplessly, Actually, I'm not that good. Eunice blinked. For the first time, she looked a little conflicted. Just you wait. After saying this, Eunice's figure flashed and disappeared on the spot. Tang En's shoulders slumped in an instant. A trace of blood dripped from his palm. He curled his lips nonchalantly and said, Wait my ass. I don't believe that you'll be able to recognize me next time. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidien. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 234. Thank you to my book friend, Moonlight Dota, for the tip. Also, Raccoon is shamelessly asking for a recommendation vote. Yes, as the saying goes, one has to be honest. You have to vote when you read. You must have enjoyed reading today's update. Then, although the order to retreat had been issued, the Grey Coat Army's encampment wasn't a city gate. How could anyone come and go as they pleased? Zwafan immediately attacked with his golden blade. However, Yema and the others didn't have the intention to fight to the death. They retreated to the teleportation portal while fighting. Goshawk's death was a huge blow to Oliver and the other two. The Dusk Hunter group had already lost 2 teammates in this mission. If the black armored man who played with exploding crystals had died, Night Demon could still calm himself down and say that it was a pity. However, after seeing Goshawk's corpse, Yema lost his composure and couldn't say anything. The Dusk Hunter group's reputation in the circle was built by the 5 teammates. They had accepted more dangerous missions in the past, but who would have thought that they would fall at the hands of the Grey Coat Army? Eunice didn't say that she would remember Tang En. She didn't just say it casually. It was what the rest of them thought. Yema clenched his fist. No one would be able to survive after killing the members of the Dusk Hunter group. Of course, it was still too early to think about this. What they needed to do now was to escape. Yema quickly observed the situation. The soldiers of the Grey Cloth Army had the absolute advantage. Although the black armored soldiers had received the order to retreat, they did not understand the deeper meaning of the order. They still wanted to escort the group of noble youths out of the battlefield. Of course, there were some black armored men who decided to give up on the mission reward and stepped onto the teleportation portal. Yema pursed his lips and said decisively, "Eunice, Oliver, you guys go first." "Yes, Captain." The two of them didn't hesitate and turned to leave Zwafan's attack range. Of course, it wasn't that they didn't have any loyalty. It was a tacit understanding and trust. They believed that their captain would be able to escape successfully, even if the opponent was a warrior who was half a step into the void realm. Zwafan naturally wouldn't let the two of them leave. Now that the situation was good, he wanted to keep the three most threatening people here. His figure suddenly soared into the air, and the golden sword slashed down. Chi! Chi! Two golden swords appeared in an instant, slashing towards Oliver and Eunice, who had already escaped from the battle. At this moment, Silver Dragon Dance, open! The silver light around Yama's body surged violently. If Zwafan's previous eruption was like a small sun, then he was now like a waning moon. He turned around and glanced behind him. He instantly went to the teleportation portal and disappeared in a flash. TSK, just leave. Why did you look at me? Tang Yen rubbed his nose in the distance with a helpless expression. In the air, Zwafan raised his hands and slowly descended. Above his head, there were dozens of noble youths floating in the air. They had all fainted because of the collision between the two golden sword lights. Yama could be said to be a ruthless character. After deciding to retreat, he thought of using these unlucky noble youths as shield. Not to mention his sharp mind, his decisiveness in giving up made him much stronger than the other black armored men. Retreat! Retreat! Damn it, the Dusk Hunter group is too unkind. The remaining black armored men were a little stunned when they saw Yama and the others act like this. After regaining their senses, they no longer cared about escorting the noble youths. They all rushed towards the teleportation portal like a swarm of bees. Without the protection of these people, the remaining noble youths naturally could not do anything. They were all quickly captured. At this point, Losha and the others in the distance heaved a sigh of relief. They had finally escaped this disaster. Now, the only chaos left was the black armored men who did not manage to retreat in time and the Legion soldiers who escaped from the captive camp. At this time, Losha waved his hand decisively. Keep them. The chaos tonight could be said to be caused by these black armored men. How could they let them go now? The soldiers swarmed in again. However, these black armored men did not have any intention to fight. Now they only had eyes for the faint purple teleportation portal. Quick, run. We have suffered a great loss this time. Run. These black armored men were still strong. After getting rid of them quickly, they all gathered at one point. Tang Yen sneered at them from afar. He was counting silently in his heart. 10, 9, 8, 7. Suddenly, the magic circle let out a soft hum. The mysterious pattern suddenly bloomed with a purple light. The black armored men who ran here could not help but scream and cover their eyes. Then, the light dimmed instantly and the purple circle disappeared. Only a little light was left. As the last light disappeared, the teleportation portal fell into a dead silence. The black armored men looked at each other. There was a mixture of anger and sadness in their hearts. Naturally, they knew what this meant. Some of the black armored men did not believe in heresy and jumped onto the magic circle. However, no matter how they stomped and slapped the ground, the magic circle did not have any reaction. Dusk Hunter Group, F***CK all your ancestors. I curse you to die a horrible death. After you die, your souls will fall into a bottomless abyss and be tortured by magma at all times. Idioms, dialects, rural slang, etc. All kinds of insults could be heard. If the members of the Dusk Hunter group were to appear here, these black armored men would definitely skin them alive. Vicious enough, ruthless enough, thorough enough. Tang En smacked his lips and let out a long sigh. The reason the Dusk Hunter group did this was because they were worried that Swafan would kill his way through the teleportation portal. Of course, even if Swafan really went there, he might not be able to find them. After all, there was a time difference. However, the other party still chose to completely eliminate this threat. This kind of cold personality was truly terrifying. Tang En thought about Eunice's warning and the last glance Yama gave him. He could not help but feel a chill in his heart. Being targeted by such a person, anyone would not be able to eat or sleep in peace. We don't want to fight anymore, we surrender. I can tell you the location of the Dusk Hunter group. Oh, the few people who ran away just now. Yes, yes. I also know that this teleportation portal is a short distance. They are just a few kilometers away. I have a lot of money. As long as you let me go, it's all yours. When the black armored men saw the gray coat army soldiers pressing forward, they immediately threw away their weapons. Then, they shouted all kinds of reasons, hoping to get their lives back. Compared to them, the army soldiers who came out of the captive camp were very unyielding. They continued to fight in small groups. In terms of strength, these black armored men were undoubtedly superior. However, in terms of fighting spirit, these army soldiers were miles ahead of their opponent. However, the overall situation was like this. The army soldiers were unable to hold on for long before they were beaten to the ground and captured again. About half an hour later, the chaotic encampment of the Grey Cloth Army finally regained its calm. However, the mess on the ground was no longer as warm and peaceful as it was before. The civilians and soldiers who were lying in pools of blood could no longer stand up. The soldiers who were rushing back and forth were doing post-war work. Some were patrolling to catch the fish that had escaped the net, some were carrying the corpses, and some were carrying buckets to put out the flames everywhere in the darkness. There were faint trembling voices calling for their loved ones. There were uncontrollable cries, and children asking where their loved ones were. Tang En did not know how he had walked all the way here. He only knew that after walking back to the tent, he saw little Carol and hugged her in his arms. I swear, I will definitely teach you the most powerful ability. Okay. The most powerful ability. No one can beat it. Okay, got it, Big Brother Tang En. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.